Let's get peppy. Welcome to PEP 158. That's PEP or Planet Extra podcast. It's an offshoot of Planet America on ABC Australia, although today it's part 2 of Planet America.
It is.
Because Dave filled in for John while he was playing hooky, and this is the crossover that absolutely no one has asked for.
That's right.
It's so exciting, Dave.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy Planet America?
Very much so, yes.
Well, you could have smiled then. No, just kidding. You're great. It was good. But if you want to see the first few topics we talked about on Planet America, you can see it on iView, on Facebook at ABC Planet America, or on YouTube on the ABC News In-Depth channel. On PEP, we're covering all stuff that's too nerdy for TV, even when we were doing TV together, because that was a more TV version than the PEP podcast version. If you're listening to us, you can also find PEP on YouTube and Facebook as well, where you'll also find time signatures and show notes in the blurb. And today, I got a lot of show notes. Yeah, more on that later. And if you leave a comment under those videos, we are likely to see it. You can also tweet us at PEP, CHASDRDAVE, PEP Chaz Dr. Dave. If you want to contact me privately, ask me on Twitter and I will allow you to direct message or email me. But for now, let's meet someone who, point blank, refuses to raise the stakes on inconsequential views. I'm, of course, talking about Dr. Pepper himself and the brightest star in the franchise today, Dr. David Smith. Hello, Dave.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Dr. David Smith. I'm an associate professor at the United States Studies Centre at the University of Sydney. But I don't speak for either of those institutions. The views you are hearing on PEP today, and indeed the ones that you heard on Planet America today, are my views alone, which is a good thing, because most of the things that I have views on, most of the things that I will take a stand on, most of the hills that I will die upon are things that those institutions don't take a position on at all, at least if they know what's good for them.
You really should have put that qualifier at the beginning of Planet America today, because people won't realise that.
People won't realise that.
And you're going to get them sued, because you are controversial.
I was. Incredibly controversial.
Taking no prisoners. Look, it's 2:10 p.m. in Sydney on Friday the 17th of May. For those keeping count, what are you grateful for at this hour, Dave?
I am grateful for the immense skill of the ABC makeup artists.
Yeah, look at you.
Yes, which leads me into a tangent treehouse. Okay. I'm going to read you the single greatest Australian true crime story ever written.
Wow.
Right. This could be like a 9-part series on Netflix. And most of the time you have long-form true crime pieces that get turned into movies and streaming series. This is only 390 words. Right. It was written in 1993 by Malcolm Brown of the Sydney Morning Herald. I think he's now the obituaries writer of the Sydney Morning Herald. Anyway. The title of this piece is Hair Dyed and Eyebrows Shaved, It's the Police. Police gaming squad officers had disguised themselves as Asians last year in order to raid the Dixon Mahjong and Bridge Club operated by Mr. Bruce Galea, according to evidence before the Independent Commission Against Corruption. They had themselves made up professionally and mingled with the crowd, leaving a performance of Jesus Christ Superstar at the Sydney Entertainment Centre before suddenly slipping inside the club. Senior Sergeant Christopher Robin Bolt, intelligence officer with the gaming squad, told the ICAC that the ruse was used because of the extreme difficulty of raiding the club. He said that Mr. Galea employed 4 or 5 people full-time, and to my knowledge, 3 of those are used exclusively as cockatoos, that is, people watching for the police.
Thank you.
2 of them normally patrol the area at the front door and the courtyard nearby, and as often as not, one of them will sit in the coffee shop that is opposite the other one and will walk up and down in front of the courtyard. The 3rd cockatoo has a place on the 3rd floor window where he can look down. Signals were sent to the person at the window manually or by portable telephone. The ICAC was told that the alleged cockatoos were seen on police surveillance videos. Sergeant Bolt said that most of the club's clientele were of Asian origin, mostly Chinese, Hong Kong Chinese, and a few Vietnamese. When it was found that the crowd from Jesus Christ Superstar went up the alley beside the club, it was decided to mingle with them so as to catch the cockatoos off guard. I think they, 2 of the gaming squad officers in the raid, went to the makeup artist at Channel 2 somewhere on the North Shore and had their hair dyed black and their eyebrows shaved, Sergeant Bolt said. If you saw the police officers involved, you'd find it hard to believe. Anyway, it did work, and they were successful in managing to get up the flight of the stairs in through the door of the premises before the cockatoos were able to alert those on the top floor. Sergeant Bolt said they had gained some valuable evidence. End of story.
How do you blend in by getting your eyebrows shaved?
Look,
That's going to make you look weird.
basically, the story here is
You
that
look like Voldemort.
20 years after the end of the White Australia policy, there were no Asian officers in the New South Wales police. So in order to infiltrate a club that had an entirely Asian and Asian Australian clientele, they had to go, he thinks it might have been to the ABC back when it was at Gore Hill, and get them made up, to look more Asian.
But Asians have eyebrows. What are they talking about?
Yeah, look, and I don't know how many of that club's regular clientele were also in the audience of Jesus Christ Superstar. Like, I've got my doubts about this plan, blending in with a crowd from Jesus Christ Superstar to sneak into the club. And I mean, they put a positive spin on that. They got up to the first floor and then they were immediately thrown out. They did not infiltrate the gambling operation.
It sounds like you didn't get the full treatment with your makeup today.
No.
The ABC. I should, by the way, I'm going to keep on blowing my nose. I got a runny nose at the moment. I'm sorry about that. So if you're worried about my health, I'm actually not sick. I just have a runny nose and just it's relentless. Ask Dave. I've been blowing my nose all day.
Yes, he has been.
But anyway, yeah. Well, I'm grateful for the ABC makeup not doing that to me. Anyway, I got a really quick one. I'm grateful for... Okay, now we all know Matt Gaetz.
Yes.
I'm not grateful for him.
No.
Just to be clear. But Matt and a few of his Gaetz mates, you might recall, got rid of Kevin McCarthy last year.
Yes.
And no one was sorry to see McCarthy go. That's not about my gratitude either. But the whole process was very much... Ouroboros, is that the word? Ouroboros, like
yes.
Snake eating its own tail?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It was sort of symbolic of Congress being a joke. And I wouldn't mind if people were getting rid of Kevin McCarthy for ideological reasons.
Yeah.
Or because of their conscience or something. That's great.
Yes, yeah.
But it wasn't that.
No.
It was Gaetz having a grudge against him for running ethics, for not trashing an ethics investigation against Gaetz.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the other guys were doing. But basically, if you're on the other side, if you're on the same side as Nancy Mace, you're on the wrong side.
Yeah.
Generally speaking. And
Yes,
so it was kind of symbolic of all the problems with Congress, right? And that's fine. If Congress wants to get progressively more superficial and more stupid and less about serious policy, which they do, that's okay. But I'm grateful when every now and then someone gets held to account for this bullshit.
Okay.
And it's happened this week.
It has?
There's a group defending Main Street PAC, which are a group dedicated to getting Republicans re-elected.
Yep.
Today, they're trying something else.
What are they doing?
They're raising money against Bob Good.
Ah, good.
And the reason, good indeed. And the reason why is because he voted to remove Kevin McCarthy.
Okay.
So they want to get him. It's only $500,000 so far that they've raised, but the entire race is only worth $3 million.
Yeah.
So that's worth something. The important thing is that there's finally some effort to create incentives to not be a terrible congressperson.
Yeah.
And so I'm grateful for that, Dave.
That is good. Yes.
So I'm going to blow my nose again, and then I'm not going to do a full blow because I know you guys don't want to hear that, which means I'm going to keep on rubbing it over and over again. Going into the correspondence. There's so much correspondence. Honestly, we could have done the entire podcast on correspondence. So I'm being very selective here.
Okay. Yes.
If you're not in the correspondence, I apologize.
Okay.
Camping correspondence.
Camping correspondence.
All good correspondence starts with camping correspondence.
Yes,
A few people responded to my rank bigotry against tents. Justin said, one of my hobbies, historical reenactment. That's a nice hobby. I like it.
Yeah.
Involves setting up encampments in a situation where we often have university groups wanting to participate.
Right.
For the most part, when given a bit of advice and guidance, most uni groups are able to get themselves set up and running a relatively safe encampment. However, without fail, every year we will get 1 to 2 groups that identify as either anarchist or libertarian. In the 7 years I've been a camp organizer, I've yet to see one of these groups not immediately create a hazard to themselves and to others. He says, in brackets, I distinctly remember one group of libertarians who were desperate to cause an outbreak of dysentery by refusing to accept reality. So
wow.
I don't even want to know about that. So
that in itself, like that sentence is a 9-part Netflix
it really
series.
is.
Yes.
It really is.
Yeah.
So but you're not grateful for it. So as long as you are working with the assumption that the encampments are able to successfully sideline the anarchists/libertarians,
yes,
the risk associated with these camps is relatively small, he says. Now, this libel against anarchists will not stand because Richard says there's a commune called Christiania in Denmark that operates under a pseudo-anarchist consensus democracy and has done so, wait for it, since 1971.
Wow.
That's a long encampment. It has fantastic restaurants and cafes because of the no-tax regime, and the weed culture was very open. So there you go. It's the defense of anarchists.
Okay.
Note, no one's defending the libertarians.
No.
No one likes libertarians. This is what I've learned over the years, Dave.
Yeah.
As a libertarian, no one likes libertarians. Tapeworm, do you have any response to any of that? No, that's just interesting.
No.
Tapeworm correspondence. All the big topics. Trivia Chris says, yes, tapeworms were indeed a real experimental diet.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Thanks, Chris.
That's a confirmation from the Trivia Man. By the way, he also said, unfortunately, your Flowrider Eurovision question was nixed in the testing process.
Oh.
Can't believe he tests. Well, he's so professional. So he instead asked which president famously read The Pet Goat to students.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Which, fair enough. That's, of course, bullshit for you guys.
Not at Eurovision.
Yeah, no, it wasn't Eurovision. All right, that's a performance I would have liked to see.
Yeah.
Now, Liz writes, Maria Callas is rumoured to have eaten a tapeworm to lose weight early in her career.
Wow.
Well, that's one side of the story.
Yeah.
The other side is Robert, who writes, a cameraman on Attenborough many years ago noticed that he always got very sick in India, but the locals were fine. He checked with London School of Tropical Medicine and was told they all had worms. On his next trip, he ingested a very particular tapeworm egg deliberately and went off filming with no illness, but some weight loss. Apparently, some gut parasites are protective. He also says Michael Mosley did something similar more recently with mixed results. Michael Mosley's a TV scientist. I couldn't verify the Attenborough story, but Michael Mosley is a TV scientist. So I could verify that. He's spoken a lot about the experience. He swallowed 3 tapeworm cysts from infected cattle in Kenya. And then, several weeks later, he swallowed a pill camera that broadcast live pictures to his iPad for a TV show. He had 3 worms attached to the lining of his intestine, about 1 metre in length each. He suffered no obvious effects, although, get this, he put on weight. He put on 1 kilo.
How?
His logic was this.
Were the worms going out and getting food for him?
His logic was this. It could be that the parasite increased my appetite. I ate a lot of chocolate. So anyone who is thinking of popping parasites as a weight loss device should think twice. So don't try it at home, folks. Take it from Michael Mosley. He's a TV scientist. You can't trust TV scientists. Who can you trust? Finally, Dr. Pseudonym writes.
Yep.
Dr. Pseudonym's great. Dr. Pseudonym is a commentary, gives us lots of good medical attention. Pork tapeworm is the most likely parasite for RFK because versus beef tapeworm, because beef tapeworm generally is more likely to stay in the gut rather than migrate into other tissues.
Okay.
Humans also have flatworm infections such as trichuris and enterobius. Tapeworm eggs are approximately 0.03 millimeters in size and are easily swallowed in the tens of thousands in undercooked meat. People have deliberately tried to infect themselves with intestinal parasites to lose weight. Not recommended, though, he says, or she says. Beef tapeworms may reach 25 meters in length and cause bowel obstruction. That's all in caps, folks. So pay attention to Dr. Pseudonym. Some research is also directed towards the use of intestinal parasites to aid in the treatment of inflammatory bowel disease, as these creatures may secrete immunosuppressive chemicals. So Robert was right about the potentially protective nature of some worms. So there you go.
Yeah.
Vietnam Correspondence, Dave. This is referring to the fact that parents were more against the Vietnam War than kids were at the time.
This is not about Operation Frequent Wind.
No, not about that, although I'm sure
there
will be correspondence about that eventually. Roger writes, Regenerational views on Vietnam. The tangle of the Korean conflict may have made veterans of our age wary of another land war in Asia, as MacArthur warned JFK. But their kids may have wanted US pride restored via triumph of the commies. I know about the second part. The first part rings true to me.
Yes, yeah,
that's a really good call.
Yep.
Of course, Eurovision correspondence was coming. I was asking about what the limits are on being in Eurovision. If San Marino gets in there. Yeah. Now, I foolishly didn't think to myself, oh, hang on, Australia's in Eurovision.
Yes.
Like, so it's clearly not just about Europe. I mean, Australia's not in Europe last I checked. Anyway, we got a couple of incorrect answers about this because I fact-checked them.
Okay.
But we got some correct ones as well. So let's read them out. Mort hit the nail on the head. In order to qualify for the Eurovision contest, it's not so much about being in Europe. You need to have a native radio/broadcast station that holds membership in the European Broadcasting Union.
Oh.
The Vatican City qualifies due to Vatican Radio, but they've never participated.
Okay.
What a great shame. Now, that is absolutely a spot-on answer. Daniel says a similar thing and then point out that SBS subscribes to the content, thus Australia is allowed to enter the competition too.
Yep.
That's true. Here's the official word from the Eurovision website. The Eurovision Song Contest is an internationally televised songwriting competition organised by the European Broadcasting Union and featuring participants chosen by EBU member broadcasters representing their countries from across Europe and beyond. Some of the EBU members I saw on the list that weren't European.
Yep.
Algeria, Tunisia, and of course Israel, who was controversial this year.
Yeah. See, and
Vatican City is in the list.
I had never thought before about who actually had responsibility for choosing them. Like, on some level, I think I thought it was national governments.
But NATO might be behind it.
That shows, but anyway,
No. Anyway, so that answers all those questions.
Another piece of Eurovision correspondence from Gareth.
Gareth, yes.
Our favourite Swedish boy band, Golden Shoes, who we've been calling Harrys.
Yeah.
They're pronounced hoorays.
Hoorays! That's so much better.
Well, it's very Eurovision in that it makes no sense and it makes complete sense at the same time. Yeah.
Well, that is good correspondence. Thank you, Gareth.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, I think we all know what most correspondence was about, though.
What? I didn't say anything controversial.
Oh, Dave, you are the new Bill. Bill held the record of correspondence when he trashed Queen, and Dave, you have just blown that record to shreds.
Okay.
Let's talk about comedy songs. Now, there's far too much correspondence.
Better than listening to them.
Oh, he's not taking a backward step. There's way too much correspondence to read out here.
I'll actually just start with one piece.
Yep.
Great apologies to my friend and Pepper, Sarah, for getting Dr. Worm stuck in her head.
This is you're just tripling down now.
Yes.
There's a lot of people who like Dr. Worm, Dave. I'll tell you that.
Really?
I know this from the comments.
Okay.
There's a lot of they might be Giants fans out there. But before we get to them, Nick likes the Bare Naked Ladies. He's a lone protester for the Bare Naked Ladies.
Wow, is this some Canadian nationalism?
I don't know. I'll tell you what he says.
What did he say?
Nick says, I really think it's unfair to lump them in with novelty acts. They're a proper indie pop rock band with a distinctive sound, a big part of the 90s in my view, and a willingness to experiment with genres. Maybe it's mere emphasis, but I think they're usually trying to say something emotionally earnest and use incidental references of humour rather than just writing a funny song about X. So there we go. And for what it's worth, I like It's All Been Gone. Also, It's All Been Done. It's All Been Done. I thought it was a good song.
Yeah, I have to admit that the only Bare Naked Ladies song I know was the one that was played to death, which I will not. I don't think that's a defense of that song.
I feel like your opinions that you expressed last week were very knee-jerk opinions generally.
They were.
But also,
sometimes the opinion is in the head, sometimes it's in the knee.
Yes. But also, Beach Bum Fella likes the Presidents of USA. He says, they're a bit annoying.
There we go.
This is the defender.
The defense begins with, they're a bit annoying.
They're a bit annoying.
Yeah.
But listen to how many decent musical ideas they have in their signature song, including a seamless key change, which makes musical sense.
Hang on,
wait for it. Quite a rarity in that style and era. Okay, now you say, what does he mean by signature song?
Yeah.
What do you think the signature song is?
A lump?
You'd think that, wouldn't you? Or,
Yes.
or Peaches, maybe.
Yeah.
He attached Volcano, which I'd never even heard of. That is not their signature song. I'm sorry, Beach Bum fella.
That was... Okay, so they were my younger brother's favourite band.
Oh, wow.
In high school.
No wonder you hate them so much.
And so in this case, I actually do know all of their songs because they got played incessantly in our house. Yeah, Volcano. So that was from, I don't think it was their second album, but it was the next album after the really successful one that had Lump and Peaches.
Oh, you mean their signature album, the third one, which no one remembers.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I am amazed that anyone else remembers anything. Anything from that. So, he must remember all the other great ones from that album, like Tiki God, and that weird one about a child having a dream about Magic Johnson.
Yeah.
But I thought that had been lost to history.
Well, that opinion is clearly not from the knee. That is from the heart.
Anyway, they suck.
From the dark, dark heart of Dave. Okay, now that They Might Be Giants. Now, I'm not going to read any correspondence on They Might Be Giants. Oh, maybe one. Because
trivia question.
Yeah?
Which band actually originally did the Istanbul, not Constantinople song?
I don't know.
One of the worst songs of all time. It was a Canadian act called The Four Lads. A lot of this stuff has connections back to Canada, which is no slur on Canada.
No.
But I do think that very long, dark winters, unfortunately, have a connection with novelty songs.
Okay, well, this is what I'm going to say. About with They Might Be Giants, I'm not going to read out much correspondence because most people just went, oh, I like them. Oh, come on, Dave. They're good. They're good, Dave. There's a lot like that. There wasn't a lot of logic. It was just a lot of, oh, come on. Give us a go. So, but I'm going to defend They Might Be Giants on your behalf.
Okay.
Last week, no, I'm not a big fan or anything, but last week...
Everything because of the qualifier. They're not very good, but...
No, I'm just saying this. I'm not a fan, but last week I said Dr. Worm was a novelty song. On reflection, I don't even think it's a novelty song. I think it's just a normal indie song that's a bit odd, like many 90s songs. When I walked away, I thought about it, I thought, shit, the 90s was full of weird songs. Like Underground by Ben Folds 5. There was so much of that kind of just weird, like almost novelty but not quite kind of music on Triple J. Like, Dr. Worm was one of them. Anyway, but this is what Rob said about it.
Yeah.
He said, at the risk of encouraging Dr. Dave to raise the stakes of an inconsequential view. Good stuff, Rob. I love that.
Nice.
I disagree with his take on Dr. Worm and They Might Be Giants. I get they're not everybody's taste. So once again, disqualified. And a qualifier. And as a fan for many years, I'm very biased. But I don't get the sense they're trying to be funny with that or similar songs. Quirky, absolutely. Whatever. I think there's a bunch of possible interpretations, but as with many of their songs, it's likely from the point of view of an unreliable narrator. In any case, that song is a banger and it's awesome live. Okay, fine. But this is my point.
Yes.
They are not a comedy band, Dave.
Okay.
Not even close. Like, they're an indie band. If you think of their first hit single, Don't Let's Start, totally normal rock song. They went on to have two big hit singles from my memory, and certainly from Wikipedia.
So why is it then that so many indie bands in the 90s went into failed comedy?
Well, like I said, there's a quirky era. I don't really understand why, but all I'm saying is just like Birdhouse in Your Soul is easily their biggest hit.
Yeah.
Completely normal song. It is. It's a completely normal song. What, is that meant to be funny? It's not. It's just a normal song. And the Malcolm in the Middle song, Boss of Me. That's their next biggest hit. Completely normal song. Like Rob says, quirky, yes, but it's not comedy, Dave. It's not like Tripod. It's just an indie band. That's all. You know, like Dogs Are the Best People by the Foves. That's not a comedy song. It's just an indie song. There was a lot of this kind of shit in the 90s. Anyway. That's my defense. Do you reject my defense?
No, I'm now just really having to think about what a normal song is.
But they had a 30-year career, and yes, they did do kids' music for a while.
There's a picture opposite me of some distant ancestry who stood on rocky shores and kept the beaches shipwreck free. Yeah. Though I respect that a lot, I'd be fine if that were my job after killing Jason off with countless screaming Argonauts.
That's not a comedy song.
Yeah,
Like, think.
Well, it's not funny, but,
No, yeah.
but as I said, most comedy songs aren't funny. But
Once again, the 90s. Think of like that Bandito song from Refreshments. It's a similar kind of thing. They're just all a bit weird. Yeah.
okay.
Anyway.
Yeah.
But-
no, notice, once again, none of this is actually saying that it's good.
No, well, I'm not pretending I'm a They Might Be Giants fan.
Okay,
I'm
yeah,
just saying
yeah.
they're not. We're going to get to comedy songs in a second.
Okay, yes.
So,
yeah.
Then there's your theory that all comedy songs are shit if they're not short.
Yes.
And look, you got some support for this one.
Yeah.
You did.
Damn right.
Paul agreed with you, except for The 12th Man and Life of Brian, Always Look on the Bright Side of Life. Elise agrees with you about Simpsons songs for sure.
Yeah.
She said she particularly likes the Monorail song. She wonders what your favourite was. You never said what your favourite song
My
was.
favourite one was it's actually an entire musical that they do in about 1.5 minutes.
Planet of the Apes?
Yeah,
that was so
Stop
good.
the Planet of the Apes. I want to get off.
Dr. Zeus.
Yeah.
That was very good. Okay, I want to tell you my theory about comedy songs now. This is coming from
Okay.
me. It's not
Okay.
coming from the Peppers.
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot of just an inchoate protest from the Peppers, but this came from me. I'm a comedy writer, so this is my area.
Yeah,
I think there are different kinds of comedy songs.
that is true.
Originally, they were like either original songs or remakes of songs where they just had utterly irrelevant lyrics to the song they were, inverted commas, parodying or just using the music of.
Yeah.
And
Like the Weird Al.
the Weird Al,
Irv?
yeah, the Weird Al Irv is the apex of that genre of
Yes,
music.
yeah, yeah.
And I don't particularly like Weird Al.
No.
But he's a lot better than, say, for instance, this. Hello, Mother, Hello, Father. From
Oh,
Alan
this
Sherman.
one!
Yes.
Now I don't want this should scare you, but my bunkmate has malaria. You remember Jeffrey Hardy? They're about to organize a searching party.
So you can hear the laughs there, which is
Yeah.
how you know it's a comedy song.
that-
Otherwise, you wouldn't know
Yes.
otherwise.
That song, though, this is weird for me to be defending it. It actually has one funny line.
Really?
Yeah.
What's that?
Our coach says he wants no sissies, so he reads to us from something called Ulysses.
Yeah, that's the line before that one. we
Yeah.
played. You like that one?
I realise out now that actually doesn't sound funny when I say it out
it's
loud, but
a
I always
terrible
enjoyed that one.
Yeah, sure. But anyway,
Yes, yeah.
my point is that's old school comedy songs.
Yes,
and
that
I can
is.
see why you would think they're shit.
Yes,
because
yeah.
because maybe in the 1960s they were great fun.
Yeah.
But now looking back on them, not so.
Remember,
fun.
that actually features in The Simpsons.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, so as you say, like basically Weird Al is where that genre gets off. Like
Yes.
that's the last point.
yeah.
Now when he sings "Fat," he's not singing about Michael Jackson.
No.
He's just using the music to talk about something else entirely.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I think those songs should be short,
Yeah.
or ideally non-existent.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that's a classic Friday Funny Man type song. as
Oh,
well. Like,
yes.
that front line used to make.
Yeah,
fun of it.
yeah.
Exactly. All right.
Those were good.
The front line making fun of it.
Yes, yeah.
But look, every now and then you get modern people doing very short versions, like you say, Simpsons.
Yeah.
Auntie Donna does very short versions of those kinds of songs.
Okay.
And they're very good. But yeah, you got to keep them short.
Yeah.
I agree with that. But you said all comedy songs. And I would say comedy songs today are rarely like that.
Okay.
I'd say these days comedy songs are usually actual parodies of a song or particularly a type of song, like a genre.
Yes.
So, for instance, Roop Squiss and Andrew both brought up the same example, which is
Yeah.
Fly the Conchords.
Oh, yes.
Who constantly made fun of genres of songs.
That's right. Yes. Yeah.
And I thought they were brilliant. And they were pretty much always parodying something with their songs. And this was an example that they gave, which you off air said you knew as well, which was
Yes.
the hip-hop-potamus and
Yeah.
versus the rhinoceros.
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 Yeah.
They call me the hip-hop-opotamus. My lyrics are bottomless. They call me the hip-hop-opotamus. Flows that glow like phosphorus. Popping off the top of this esophagus. Rocking this metropolis. I'm not a large water-dwelling mammal. Where did you get that preposterous hypothesis? Did Steve tell you that perchance? Steve.
My rhymes and records, they don't get played because my records and rhymes, they don't get made. And if you rap like me, you don't get paid. And if you roll like me, you don't get laid.
My rhymes are so potent that in this small segment I made all of the ladies in the area pregnant. Yeah, sometimes my lyrics are sexist, but you lovely bitches and hoes should know I'm trying to correct this.
Okay, so
Yeah, that's good.
yeah, and to when you're doing a parody of a genre,
Yeah.
if you're doing a parody of a 4-minute song, you can't make it 20 seconds.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it takes a while.
Yes.
Like, and so that clip that song was 2 minutes long. and it's fine.
What this reminds me of
Yeah.
is an actual sincere hip hop song I heard probably about 20 years ago. I can't find any trace of it now. It's in the genre that used to be known as skip hop, but probably isn't
Yes.
anymore. People rapping in Australian accents.
Oh yeah.
I don't know who this was. I don't know what happened to them, but it was 4 minutes of this. I've got more rhymes than Coogie's got backpackers. More rhymes than Canberra's got firecrackers. More rhymes than Coogie's got backpackers. More rhymes than Canberra's got firecrackers. I've got more rhymes than Coogie's got backpackers. More rhymes than Canberra's got firecrackers.
So their rhymes were one.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah. That for 4 minutes.
And it wasn't a parody. It was
No,
just
that
bad.
was it.
That's probably the inspiration for Fly the Conchords.
Yeah, yeah. And like, obviously, I am not a good rapper,
No,
but that rendition of it was about the same level of skill.
I can read that. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can believe that.
Yeah.
Well, okay, a little bit. Anyway, but that's my first example.
Okay.
My second example, I've already mentioned, Tripod. They often did comedy songs that were parodies of genres of music as well.
Yep.
So it was like a real song that was a parody of that kind of song.
Yep.
So once again, it needs to be 2 or 3 minutes because if
Yes.
you did it for 30 seconds, it wouldn't work as a parody, right?
okay, yep.
And then one of the best genre parody musical comedians I've ever seen is
Yeah.
Rachel Bloom in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. I don't know
Okay.
if you ever saw Crazy Ex-Girlfriend.
No.
But basically, the whole show was revolving around her fantasies of musicals. And every single episode, they had 2 to 3 parodies of a different genre. And they were full song parodies, right? And so,
Yeah.
for now, I'm not going to play these because they're going to get copyright struck for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm going to link in the blurb. So go to the blurb, and even on the audio podcast in the blurb, go follow the links because I've got some good stuff for you here. Like there's the Math of Love Triangles, which is one of my favorites, which is basically a second perfect parody of Marilyn Monroe.
Okay, yeah.
Right? And once again, it goes for 4 minutes because you're parodying a 4-minute
Yes,
song.
yeah.
Right? And it's this is one of the very few times I'm going to really emphasize you should go to the homework and the blurb because it's good. Also throwing in Let's Generalize About Men, which was a parody, not only a parody of 80s feminist power pop songs, but also a social satire about sexual attitudes today at the same time
Right.
and just funny.
Yep.
You can't fit all that in 30 seconds.
No.
You know, like, so you need time, right? And if you're parodying some, the best example though, actually, before I tell you the best example, I was just going to say The Simpsons, to be honest, did at times do short versions of this as
Yes,
well.
yeah.
Like, for instance, my favorite Simpsons song
Yeah.
is a parody that's making fun of a genre as well as the song, which was you can go to the link. Once again, no way I'm going to play it in here because of the copyright strike. When I was 17,
Oh, yes, yeah.
I drank some very good beer.
That was great.
I think it's 30 seconds, but it's
Yes.
just so funny. So go
Yeah.
follow the link if you haven't seen that. But the more you make fun of a genre, the more time you need. So my perfect example here is The Lonely Island, who have done some awful songs.
They have done some real
But they've
shockers.
also done some really good songs.
Yeah.
Like, and my two favorites, in particular, my favorite is Jack Sparrow, which was, do you remember Jack Sparrow?
Yeah.
Which was essentially them making fun of a hardcore nightclub rap song.
Yeah.
And then Michael Bolton is supposed to perform the hook, but he's obsessed for some reason with Pirates of the Caribbean, and he keeps hijacking their nightclub song to sing about the Pirates of the Caribbean with enthusiasm. Now, to do that, to make that comedy work, you need to set up the nightclub parody. Then you need to undermine it with Michael Bolton, and then you need to escalate, right? That's 2.5 minutes.
Comedy masterclass from Jazz here.
Well, I just
Yes.
make my point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then also the Shy Ronnie songs are parodies of Rihanna as well, which are very good, but you need to bring out the Rihanna.
Yeah, I
for the
mean,
parody.
okay, yeah. Also, Spinal Tap.
Yeah, totally. And my favorite comedy song of all is in the blurb.
Yeah.
It's actually a sketch, but it's a song in a sketch, which is from I Think You Should Leave. It's probably in my top 5 sketches of all time, I'd say. It's the Bones of Their Money song. Do you know that one?
Yeah.
It's actually my ringtone. I love it that much. Go to the Blurb and watch that. It's such a good sketch. But you see my point about that song?
Yes,
It goes for 3 minutes.
Yeah.
It can't be less than 3 minutes.
Okay.
So do you concede that when you're doing more than just a song, when you're parodying things, when you're parodying visual elements and genres and having lots of layers, you need time to do it?
Okay, I will concede that. And actually, I'll even add another example, which would be my favourite, which is David Bowie's song in Extras.
Oh, yeah. I'll put that in the blurb as well.
Yes.
Good one.
Yeah.
There we go.
Which Ricky Gervais loves telling this story about, because Ricky Gervais wrote the lyrics and David Bowie wrote the music. And he apparently called up David Bowie, and David Bowie was asking what kind of song he wanted. And Ricky Gervais said, "Oh yeah, something retro like Life on Mars." And Bowie said, "What, you want me to just produce another Life on Mars? You want me to just knock out another Life on Mars?" Yeah.
We've been going for like 35 minutes on the feedback. I like to keep the correspondence a bit short of half an hour. So I'll just pull it right there.
Okay.
I mean, at least we've got the comedy songs sorted out. That's the important bit for this podcast. At least from the feedback that you would think that's the important bit.
Yeah.
I am going to let's deal with the topic that we actually dealt with on Planet America before.
Okay.
And we might just revisit some old ground there, but I think it's important
Yes.
to
Yeah,
really
yeah.
nail this New York Times Siena
Yes.
poll,
Yeah, yeah,
because people go, "Why are you so obsessed with this poll?"
Mm.
The reason why I think the media is generally obsessed with it is, number one, it is a very good poll. Like in
Yes.
terms of like their methodology is very
Yes,
good.
and their transparency about their methodology.
That's what I had to say.
Yes.
Easily the most transparent of all the polls.
Yep.
So you can really dive into it and draw some really amateur, incorrect conclusions, which is what we're going to do now. Dave.
Yes.
Go for it.
So the most recent version of this poll was just about swing states. It was about 6 swing states. And they found using the registered voters screen, the only one in which Biden was ahead was Wisconsin. And
That's on registered votes.
that's on registered
On
votes.
likely votes, it was Michigan.
Yes, on likely votes, it was Michigan, and was trailing Wisconsin. And then, however you look at it, was trailing in Pennsylvania, although not by very much. Margins in Michigan and Wisconsin were also very small, but by a very large margin in Nevada. 12.
Yep.
By margins that look pretty hard to surmount in Georgia, it was 9, was it? And in Arizona, which was 7.
Yeah.
So that's significant because there is not a huge amount of high quality polling data of these swing states so far. If you look now at the average of polling in those swing states, Trump's ahead in all of them, albeit by 1 to 2 points in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, but by all around by like 6 points in those Sunbelt states.
Yes.
So, as Chaz says, this is seen as a gold standard poll, and it's become a focal point poll in the way that I didn't really see any other poll become in previous years. I think part of that is because there's actually quite a bit more literacy about polls out there now, and people are aware that when they're talking about this poll, they know it's not necessarily the correct poll. I don't think anyone talks about polls like that anymore, but it is one also because it comes out regularly. It's a very, very good point of comparison. And so...
And they ask the same questions.
Yeah. And so as we've stressed before, we don't know which polls are actually getting the point estimates right. We will not know that until after the election. But with a poll like this, there's a lot of really important intra-polling comparison that we can look at. And as far as intra-polling comparison goes, there are 2 really important points from this one. The first is that this same poll found that Democrats were actually ahead in every Senate race. which was not something I was expecting to see.
No.
For a lot of reasons. We talked a lot this year, basically about how we were sure that Republicans are going to win the Senate. This poll suggests that Democrats could actually win it because not only do Democrats have leads in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Nevada, those are significant leads. The smallest lead is held by Ruben Gallego because that's the only open seat, but even that's a pretty substantial lead. But the ones in which there are Democratic incumbents are doing very well. And, I mean, this is partly because polling often finds that people feel a lot more warmly towards people they regard as their representatives rather than, say, the president.
But that's been fading in the last few years.
It has been fading in the last few years. But, yeah, it has been fading overall, but you still keep seeing striking examples of it, like the way that governors keep getting re-elected, and the margins they keep getting re-elected on. But, yeah, Biden is badly outperforming
Underperforming.
Underperforming. Yes.
Yeah.
Underperforming Democrats in the Senate, which is not a good sign because Trump massively underperformed Republicans in Congress in 2020. And look where he ended up. When you have this many people saying, yes, they're absolutely planning to vote for a Democrat in the Senate, but they're also planning to vote for Trump, the fact that people are able to think that way is a big problem for Biden because it means that for a lot of people, despite the matrix of partisan polarization that we look at everything through, for a lot of people, Trump seems to have slipped outside of that. And they're prepared to give him another shot even while sticking to traditional partisan allegiances.
Yeah, and I was going to say that the important thing about with these Senate candidates doing so much better than Biden is that it makes the top line number less relevant.
It does.
Like, because you go, okay, whether Trump was ahead by 6 points on both registered and likely votes, voters in this particular poll, right? You go, that's fine. Maybe it's a good poll for Trump. Maybe the next poll, Biden will be ahead by 1, whatever.
Yeah.
But that's about sample size, right?
Yes,
and that's about the particular sample.
Yeah.
But in this case, forget your sample. It's the same people.
Yes.
It's the same people who are saying, I won't vote for Biden, but I will vote for a Democrat. So that's telling you that whatever sample you got, that the Democrat is going to be in Nevada. The Democrat was 14 points ahead of Biden.
Yeah.
Which means there is no world in which Biden is winning in Nevada right now with those kinds of numbers.
Yes, yeah.
Unless the Senate candidate in another sample would be ahead by 25 points. It's just ridiculous. So that's telling you that don't worry about the sample.
Yeah.
Biden's in trouble here.
Yes, yeah. The other intra-polling thing which spells trouble for Biden, intra-polling comparison, is so New York Times Siena has the last time they conducted one of these swing state polls was November. There's barely been any movement at all in the swing state polls,
even though there's been so much action.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in the national polls, Biden's improved by about 5 points.
Yeah.
So national polls have gone from Trump up by 5 to basically even in New York Times Siena, or not quite even, but anyway, Biden's improved significantly at the national level, but not in these swing states, or maybe a little bit actually in the Rust Belt, but certainly not in the Sun Belt. So that's a big problem for him if he's specifically underperforming himself in swing states.
Yeah, that's true. You got more observations on this one?
I do have more, but I want you to go.
Okay, all right. Okay, I'll make a couple, and then you jump in.
I'll just reiterate what I just said a second ago about the registered versus likely voters.
Yes.
Like we've seen until now, Biden outperforming amongst likely voters. They were the same in this one. Registered and likely. And that's really interesting because that is, once again, that might be one of them.
Well, with two odd exceptions.
Yep.
And they are both quite odd exceptions. In one, Biden gained 5 points in Michigan. From likely vote, from 42 to 47%, which happened in the last swing state poll that they did there as well. And even though Nate Cohn will basically defend everything about this poll, he says that one's a bit weird and I can't explain it and I won't defend it. The other one was that Wisconsin flips from Biden to Trump with the likely vote filter on. So don't know what's going on there.
The other point which I want to make quickly was the point I made on Planet America because I think it's an important one, which is that all the demographic issues we've talked about
Yep.
are supported by this poll.
Yes.
Which is that in all 6 states, Trump received about 90% of support or more from Republicans. Biden only got that in the Rust Belt states. 94% of Democrats in Michigan, 90% of Democrats in Pennsylvania, 93% in Wisconsin. In the Sun Belt, that's Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia. 84% of Democrats backed Biden in all 3 states. Okay. White voters make up about 84% of the electorate in Wisconsin, 79% in Pennsylvania, and 74% of the electorate in Michigan. But they only make up half the electorate in Georgia and Nevada, and 60% of the electorate in Arizona. So does that mean that the only reason why he got less Democrats in the Sun Belt is not because he's on the nose with Democrats, but because he's on the nose with young people? And the answer is non-white people.
Yes, yeah.
And the answer is yes. Trump and Biden are essentially tied amongst 18 to 29-year-olds and Hispanic voters, even though both Biden won by basically 20 points in 2020. Trump wins more than 20% of black voters, which is a lot in this poll as well. So that's the reason why Democrats aren't supporting him. It's not because Democrats aren't supporting him. It's because young Democrats and Hispanic Democrats and black Democrats aren't supporting him by quite as much.
Yes, yeah.
And that makes a big difference. Is this because of Gaza, which is at least for young voters, what everyone's saying? Well, Trump did lead 57 to 25 amongst Middle Eastern, North African or Muslim voters in the poll.
Yeah. Although the caveat on that would be that's a small sample.
Yes, that is an important caveat.
Yep.
We should also say that Arab or Muslim voters who say they voted in the 2020 election reported that they voted Biden 56 to 35. And Arab or Muslim voters who didn't back Biden, 70% of them said that their most important issue in the race was foreign policy or the war in Gaza. But as you say, it's becoming a very, you've sliced the salami really thin there. So that may be a margin of error issue.
Yes, yeah.
By a 24-point margin, voters under the age of 30 said they trust Trump more to deal with Israel-Gaza, which is a wider margin than any other group. So there you go.
All right.
But only 13% of the voters who say they voted for Biden last time, who don't plan to do so again, said that his foreign policy or the war in Gaza was the most important issue to them.
Yes, and that was another finding of this poll, that Biden isn't really leaking from the left.
No.
He is leaking from the right of the Democratic coalition. It's more moderate and conservative Democrats who are defecting to Trump this time around.
Yeah, and also that's backed up, by the way, by Pew, where the 18 to 29-year-olds in Pew are the least likely to say that they follow the war, according to their March survey. 14% said they were closely tracking updates. 58% said they weren't following news of the conflict at all. So it's not about Gaza. What it's about, we know what it's about. It's about the economy. 90% of young voters and 85% of Latino voters think the economy is fair or poor. And Trump is trusted better on the economy by both those groups by substantial margins.
Yeah.
Take it away. What's the next thing?
Yes. There's some other kind of weird shit in this poll.
Yep.
17% of voters believe that Biden is more responsible than Trump for the fall of Roe versus Wade.
Yes. It's not just this poll either.
Yeah.
That's in a few polls. Go on.
Yes, yeah. Now, fall of Roe versus Wade did happen during Biden's presidency.
That's true.
So there's
can't deny that to them.
Simultaneity bias perhaps going on there.
That's a good word.
Yeah. This has been presented as this is a real problem for Biden, which, I mean, that certainly does sound like a problem for Biden. On the other hand, I'm not sure that the 17% who hold him more responsible for the fall of Roe versus Wade than Trump are the most likely voters.
Probably not.
Or are the most voters most likely to vote for Biden. So, I'm not going to read too much into that.
And also, we know there's going to be abortion ads for the next 6 months. You think they'll get the message pretty soon?
You would think so, yes.
So they are potentially winnable voters.
Yeah.
I was going to say, it's not the only poll that did that. Navigator Research found something very similar.
Yeah.
They found 34% of independents thought Biden was responsible for Roe versus Wade falling. 32% of black voters thought that, and 42% of Hispanic voters thought that.
Yeah, they're going to be hitting them hard with these ads. Yes.
Yeah. All right, go on.
Okay, there are a few bright spots for Biden in this poll. One is that, on one viewpoint, this actually shows an incredibly close race.
Yep.
In that it is going to come down, like all that Biden actually needs of those 6 is Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Depending on which filter you put on, he could be ahead in either Wisconsin or Michigan, and Pennsylvania is very close. Yeah. So on one viewpoint, you just look at that and go, yeah, it's a close race. It's between 1 or 2 points either way. We already knew that. Nothing to see here. So that would be one thing that you can that you can salvage from that potentially, and the fact that in those states it actually has got a little bit closer. Yeah. So that's one thing that you could look at. Second is that when you see all of these people telling pollsters that they're planning to do this split ticket vote, campaigns would definitely look at people like that as persuadable. Yeah. Because these are people who are clearly not entrenched on one side of the culture war. They would hope that these are people who have basically forgotten what Trump was actually like.
Yep.
And when they see him more, including in debates, which we will get to.
No, I don't think we will. I think we got to it.
Oh, we did. Okay.
That was on Planet America.
Okay. For those of you who didn't see Planet America, there are going to be 2 debates, one in June and one in September.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're going to be thinking these people are open to be changed.
Yes. Totally.
Yeah.
On the other side,
yes,
when we're talking about winning voters back that he's lost, there is a problem, and it's a 3-letter problem, and those letters are R, F, and K.
Yes.
And I want to tell you about what this poll said about them, because this was really interesting. 8% of Trump supporters prefer Kennedy in the 5-way race.
Yep.
7% of Biden supporters prefer Kennedy. So, well, that's all right. It's helping Biden because Trump's losing more voters. Here's the thing. Kennedy actually, while he wins more Trump 2024 voters than Biden 2024 voters, he wins more Biden 2020 voters than Trump 2020 voters.
Yes.
The people he wins are the people who used to be Biden supporters, who are no longer Biden supporters, but aren't going all the way to Trump.
Yes.
So what that means is right now, sure, Biden is losing less current voters than Trump.
Yeah.
But if he wants to win this election, he needs to win his old voters back.
Yes.
That's how you win the election.
Yeah.
His old voters haven't gone to Trump. They've gone to Kennedy.
Yes.
So he can scaremonger all he likes about Trump.
Yeah.
He's not getting them back that way.
Yes.
And if he becomes more popular, if the economy picks up, if he becomes more popular in the next little while, it's going to be hard. He's got to get them back from Kennedy, not from Trump.
Yeah.
So Kennedy is not a spoiler now.
Yeah, he could be.
But he could be a spoiler for Biden as the race becomes closer. It's a real warning sign, I think.
Yeah. In the New York Times write-up, so it had all these interviews with voters, which are usually not worth very much on their own. But there was one, actually, with a young University of Michigan student that I thought summed up Biden's problem completely.
I wonder if it's the one I've got here.
He said, Biden is weak, but Trump is a bad man. So I'm voting for Kennedy. Now, that view, Biden weak, Trump bad man, I don't think that student's alone there. I think that's a very widely held view of the choice.
Yep.
And one of the reasons why people are calling Biden weak is because of disappointment with Biden and because of what they see as the deterioration of Biden as well. So that's going to be very difficult to overcome.
That's not the one I had. The one I had, which I love this quote. This is same piece, same area.
Yeah.
Quotes from punters.
Yeah.
Chris Myers, a 52-year-old union construction worker.
Yeah, this one was good.
In Hartford, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So he said he had never seen more construction work than what was underway now in the state. In fact, he said he was helping to build the the $3 billion Microsoft artificial intelligence data center that Mr. Biden was trumpeting on Wednesday in Wisconsin as a promise delivered by his administration. Yet, Mr. Mize said he would split his vote by supporting Ms. Baldwin, who he praised for doing some good things for the state, that's a Democrat, and Mr. Trump, saying, I like his go-get-em, take-no-crap attitude. Mainly, Mr. Mize complained that Mr. Biden's visit last week, celebrating the creation of Mr. Mize's job, ended up slowing down the concrete truck. You can't win when you turning up to take credit for giving someone their job is met with derision by the person whose job you gave them to.
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
That's a no-win situation
That's not a good
for
sign.
Biden. Yeah, right there. And also, just a little bit of background. When Biden turned up in Wisconsin, it wasn't just to trumpet the $3 billion Microsoft artificial intelligence data center, but also to note that Trump had plans in Wisconsin which went nowhere.
Yeah.
Like multi-billion-dollar plans that he screwed up and went nowhere.
Yes.
Biden did the same thing and delivered.
Yeah.
And this guy's worried that the concrete trucks were going a bit too slow. so that's a problem.
Yeah.
The other things I noted for this poll, as far as the trial goes, are people paying attention to the trial? 29% of voters in battleground states said they were paying a lot of attention to the trial, which is not much.
No.
I mentioned, I'm not going to go into detail here, but because we've spent enough time on this, but I mentioned on Play America the fact that 69% of people said the system needs major change. 70% of voters believe that Trump will bring major change.
Yep.
24% say the same about Biden.
Yep.
That is a losing position for incumbents.
That is a losing position.
Like, incumbents don't want change elections.
No.
They want 4 more years.
Yes.
So when people want change and they say the other guy will give you change, that's a bad situation.
That is a very bad situation.
Yeah. And it wasn't close. So
Yeah.
that is a concern. And the other thing I would note, this is actually not from New York Times, this is from the CNN poll, but still, this is from last week. 55% of all Americans now say Trump's presidency was a success. 44% say it was a failure. In January 2021, 55% considered it a failure. As far as Biden goes, 61% say his presidency thus far has been a failure. 39% say it's been a success. So, once again, that's not a good result for an incumbent.
No.
So, he's got some problems.
Yes.
Do you have anything else on this?
No.
I want to put a correspondence to you.
Yep.
A question from Hasav. Just wondering if you think the polls where people say they felt they were better off under Trump than under Biden, relevant?
Yep.
Given what I just talked about, reflect not only the current inflation rates, but also the large COVID aid packages that I thought essentially provided Yang-esque UBI payments to a large proportion of Americans. People may have a pretty personal experience of illness during the COVID pandemic, but may not blame Trump specifically for that, seeing as the pandemic was worldwide. But if they didn't also experience financial hardship thanks to expanded benefits, they might see that as something to thank Trump for.
Good question.
What do you reckon?
Yeah, I'm not sure. That is a very good question. I mean, every time I see this sort of assessment that Trump's presidency was a success or whatever, the people like good memories, I'm like, they are forgetting the last year.
Yeah.
And by the way, the last year wasn't just COVID. The last year was the biggest wave of protests in the United States since the Civil Rights Movement.
And crime.
And crime.
People love to talk about crime.
Last year was the National Guard getting sent into DC. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that that happened in the final year, and I think that people might be forgetting how completely in denial Trump actually was about COVID. That he was basically trying to make it go away. By just saying that it would, that it would go away. But that's a very interesting point because Congress acted so quickly. I mean, this was by far the biggest bipartisan legislation that anyone had seen.
Yeah.
It was not that year was not the economic disaster that it could have been. Most people were actually really. I mean, a lot of people died, but in economic terms, most people were kept afloat.
America through COVID did way better than the rest of the world.
Yeah.
With the exception of Sweden. Yeah.
What about Australia?
I think America did better than Australia did. I think America did really well. You doubt me?
I'm not sure about that. But anyway.
Okay. No, look, I mean, I always forget Australia even exists, so I might be wrong. Anyway, but go on.
Yeah, and it would depend on what measure you're using, but and this was one of the reasons why the recovery was so fast. Yeah, so that's a good question. Yeah, don't know.
My view is, I think you've answered why I think it's not the case, even though I think it's a good question, a good thought from Asav. I think that people have just forgotten that year entirely.
Yeah.
There were so many things that happened during that year, which I don't think people remember.
Yeah, people don't want to remember.
Yeah, I think that
it's a part of everyone's lives that they want to move on from.
Yeah, I think people are just so distracted by inflation now and so forth. They've just it's just nostalgia.
Chaz, I want to do something I have never done before on Planet America.
What's that?
Oh, I'm sorry, on PEP.
Are you gonna give me a massage?
No. I'm going to give you a stats nugget.
Hey!
Stats Nugget.
Stats Nugget. Woo!
Okay. I owe Michael Bloomberg an apology. I'm sure he's been waiting for one for a long time.
Oh, this is going to be campaign related.
Because for a long time, I've been saying that Michael Bloomberg held the record for most amount of money flushed down the toilet on a campaign.
This is going to be a great stats nugget.
Now, while that remains true in absolute terms, it's maybe not true in relative terms. Very good article by Aaron Blake today in the Washington Post. And this is one of the reasons why he's my favourite political correspondent, is because he's a little bit pepper-brained. I would say, because he was...
He's a pepper.
He was looking at the Maryland primary race where this Democrat called David Trone sunk a lot of his own money into a campaign. And he was pointing out that this wasn't even David Trone's biggest waste of money in the last 10 years. The biggest was in 2016, where he spent $13.4 million of his own money to get 35,400 votes, equaling a cost of $379 per vote. Now, that's number 4 on the list.
Okay.
Number 3 on the list is Bloomberg.
Yes.
With $1.9 billion of his own money spent in 2020
$1.9 billion.
for 2.5 million votes, equaling $427 per vote. Now, I'm going to skip number 2 for a second. I'm going to go straight to number 1.
Okay.
I'm going to go straight to the champion.
Yeah.
It's Doug Burgum.
Course.
Doug Burgum, because of the fact that he dropped out before the voting began, and because there were already a lot of other people on the ballot, it meant he ended up spending $4 million. Because remember, he was giving out vouchers just in order to get a sufficient polling number to get in the debate.
Yeah, he was paying for donations.
He was paying for donations.
He was giving people more money than the value of their donations because to qualify for the debate, you needed a certain number of donors.
So
it was the least efficient spending ever.
So he spent $14 million to get 499 votes. Not 499,000, 499 votes, which equals $27,997 per vote, which is a lot of money in anyone's English.
That record will never be broken.
But I just want to talk about number 2 for a second, okay? Because in Shakespearean terms, Michael Bloomberg is tragedy, right? He actually thought he had a serious chance of winning. He was being told by credible people around him he could win this thing. Doug Burgum, that's comedy.
Yeah.
Like, nothing is funnier than that.
Yeah.
Yes. Number 2 is Tom Steyer.
Of course.
Tom Steyer, in 2020, spent $342 million in the Democratic primary to get 260,000 votes. Now,
he got 260,000 votes.
He got 260,000 votes. So that's $1,315 per vote, which is obviously a lot less than Doug Burgum's 27,000. But that's also a lot more than Michael Bloomberg's $427 per vote. Yeah. He spent more than a third as much as Bloomberg for less than a tenth of the votes. Yeah. Now, there's no dramatic category that actually encompasses this. I mean, I had forgotten his existence. So maybe it's history in Shakespearean terms. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly.
Steyer.
I mean, we talked about all of these clowns on PEP 4 years ago. If we go back, we can probably find... I had no idea he was spending that much. Tom Steyer was not a politician. He He was a business guy
He
who,
was a donor.
yeah, big lobbyist for green energy. Was able to get high level audiences with Barack Obama. Actually tried to get himself arrested at the White House once
I didn't know that.
at a climate rally, but his brother dissuaded him at the last minute. Anyway, so $342 million of his own money. This guy is a philanthropist, right? So one of his big philanthropy things was bringing high-speed internet connections to remote villages in Mexico and India. How many of them could he have got for that $342 million?
Yeah, when you put that
Like,
way.
how many dog shelters could have been built for that so that poor Cricket wouldn't have had to die? That is just extraordinary.
I don't know how many dog shelters he bought, but he certainly bought one dog of a campaign.
And in case you're wondering who was number 5, Vivek.
Of course, Vivek. See, the thing I love about this,
Yeah.
I love that people are counting these numbers because it means that future billionaire money wasters are going to have to choose when they're a couple of weeks out from Iowa.
Yeah.
They're going to have to choose. Am I going to go for the record for the most spent overall?
Yeah.
Or for the most spent per vote?
Yes.
because if I drop out now, it'll be most spent per vote.
Yeah.
If I stick it out for another month,
That's right.
it'll be most overall.
Yeah, no. I don't know if anyone is ever going to beat Doug Burgum's record.
Yeah, in fact he was spending money for donations.
For donations.
That's tough to beat.
And then ended up with fewer than 500 votes. By the way, if you're wondering where Rudy Giuliani is on this list, this is only a list of self-funded candidates.
Oh, okay.
If you included people who are using donations as well, Giuliani would be pretty high up because
He's not Doug Burgum.
No, he's not Doug Burgum. So Giuliani spent $59 million and was only in one contest in Florida and came 4th. So I don't know how much that works out to per vote, but yeah, Burgum. That's that's like Don Bradman's batting average. That one.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. He's the Bradman.
It's
the
like
Bradman,
5 standard deviations away.
the Bradman of wasted money. Yeah, that's good. By the way, I just didn't realize the reason my nose is leaking so much is because I should have used a decongestant beforehand. My nose is blocked. And when it's blocked, it leaks. Anyway,
That's the medical hour with Chaz. By the way, Doug Burgum is a potential vice presidential candidate.
yeah, absolutely.
In fact, his stakes, like many of them, have risen considerably now that Kristi Noem has sunk her campaign in a graveyard of dog bones.
Burgum's probably the conventional wisdom favourite right now.
Wow.
I mean, I don't think he's the favourite, but he's the conventional wisdom
Yeah,
favourite.
yeah, yeah.
I think. Yeah. Anyway,
Make him Secretary of the Treasury.
we will talk about about his contribution to the VP race in a second.
Okay.
Like in this week's installment.
Okay.
Okay, I want to talk about some Cohen stuff, the Trump trial.
Okay, yes, yeah.
Even though we talked about it on the show, this is different. What we're going to talk about.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so there's a couple of things I want to focus on. First
Yeah.
of all, just about Cohen generally.
Mm-hmm.
He obviously has reliability issues. He lied under oath to the Mueller probe. He
Yep.
told the New York civil fraud trial of Trump's.
Yes.
A few weeks back that he lied under oath in his 2018
Yeah,
guilty
yeah.
plea.
Yeah.
He said under oath he lied under oath. That was nice.
Yeah.
I think Eli Honig put it quite well on CNN, so I'll play that.
But I've never seen a witness who's lied to Congress, who's lied in court, who's lied to the IRS, who's lied to the Southern District of New York, who lied to his banker. The entire prosecution witness team has been lied to by Michael Cohen.
Okay, so that's one way to put it. And in fact, I think he's lying right now. I think he lied today, or at least yesterday. This week.
Yeah, okay.
This was him. I've got some quotes here. Thank you very much to Darren for these quotes. He's the one who's been sending me these text files. which
Okay,
I could never access.
Yes.
The transcript without Darren. This was him explaining why he was recording Trump while they were talking about paying off David Pecker. Because he had that secret recording.
Yes, yeah.
And I asked him, why were you recording Trump? This is what he said. Question, why did you feel it was important to tape this one conversation? Answer, it was so I could show it to David Pecker. And that way he would hear the conversation so that he would know that we are going to be paying him. Mr. Trump is going to be paying him back because it became a regular conversation between the two of us. Question, they need to be paid back. Answer. And I also wanted to remain loyal to Mr. Trump. Does anyone believe that Michael Cohen was recording Trump on the sly because he wanted to play it to Pecker to show how much he could trust Trump? Come on. Cohen was recording everyone. He's a dodgy fellow.
This somehow reminds me of that scene in The Room where Tommy Wiseau hits upon the nonsensical plot to record everything with the never-ending tape recorder.
Exactly. It's it's just so dubious. And by the way, at this point in time, Trump was talking directly to Pecker. Trump was telling him, was giving him assurances directly. It's so nonsensical this explanation. But just slip by. People went, oh yeah, okay, whatever. He's still lying. The man lies a lot. Anyway, but assuming the jury believes Cohen.
Yeah.
Apart from that, but they believe the other stuff he said.
Yeah.
What is he given the case? I want to take you through it.
Okay.
This week, because quite a lot.
Take us through it, Chaz.
Okay. Cohen says he overheard Trump's conversation with Pecker about paying to suppress the Karen McDougal story. He also supplied tapes of the two of them discussing paying off McDougal. That's the tape I just referred to. Who Trump wanted to be paid with cash. Trump said pay with cash. That shows an intention to hide the payment. It's also a pattern of behavior that would inform the Stormy Daniels transactions to come.
Yeah.
Right? He gives us that. Trump also says that he knew nothing about it in this trial, so that catches Trump out in a lie.
Yeah.
But here's the good stuff.
Oh!
Yeah.
You know how Trump just loves insulting people?
Yes.
Loves coming up with names.
Yes.
I'm going to give him one for free.
Oh, yeah? What's that?
Michael Cohen.
Yeah, what's that?
The Tapeworm.
The tapeworm. Because he tapes stuff.
He's obsessed with taping things.
And he's a worm. They call him Dr. Tapeworm. That's really good. There you go. I hope Trump's listening.
Why am I putting my talents to this use?
Okay. Now, the second thing I'm going to talk to you about is about the personal expense, campaign expense thing. Before we get there, I'm going to tell you about how Michael Cohen makes that entire discussion irrelevant before we go through it. Because if you believe Michael Cohen, and that's a big if, but if you believe Michael Cohen, he blows out this question completely out of the water. Let me read some transcripts for you. This is about when Stormy Daniels wanted to seek her story. She wanted to put her story out right after Access Hollywood. So Trump heard that Stormy Daniels was trying to sell her story right after Access Hollywood, right? This is what happened then. Cohen says he was like, just take care of it. Question. Did he say anything to you at the time about how this might be viewed if it got out? Cohen. Yes. Question. What did he say in substance? Question. Cohen. He said to me, this is a disaster, total disaster. Women are going to hate me because this is really a disaster. Women will hate me. Guys might think it's cool, but this is going to be a disaster for the campaign. Question. What, if anything, did you understand him to mean by women will hate this? And what was his concern? Cohen. So at the time, Trump was polling very, very poorly with women. And this coupled with the previous Access Hollywood tape, he just stated, this is a disaster, get control over it. Then it gets worse. They then ask him more detail about that control over thing. And Cohen says, he told me to work with David Pecker, and get control over this. Purchase the life rights. We need to stop this from getting out. Question. Was there any conversation about pushing it to a period of time? Yes. Question. What was that? Cohen. So during the negotiation to purchase and acquire the life rights, what he had said to me is, what I want you to do is just push it out as long as you can. Just get past the election. Because if I win, it has no relevance. I'll be president. If I lose, I don't even care. Question. Did you bring up at the time the topic of his wife, Melania, in one of those conversations with Trump? I did. What did you say in substance to him? Cohen. I said to him, and how are things going to go upstairs? Question. Were you concerned about that? Answer. I was. Question. And what, if anything, did he say to you about that? Cohen. Don't worry, he goes. How long do you think I'll be on the market for? Not long. Question. What do you understand that to mean? Cohen. He wasn't thinking about Melania. This is all about the campaign. So it's pretty clear if you believe Cohen.
Yeah.
No personal expense situation.
No.
This is a campaign expense.
Yeah.
But then it gets worse. Because Cohen then gives us that Trump wanted to push the payments past the election so he could stiff them. Question. Now, you said that, I think, by this date, neither you, obviously, or Mr. Trump had signed this agreement by that date. No, ma'am. Why hadn't you signed it at that point, Cohen? Because during my conversations with Mr. Trump, it was again about delaying the deal and trying to push it past the election, which was upcoming. So if he just wanted to push it past the election so he wouldn't pay them, that means he didn't care if Melania found out.
Yeah.
It's about the campaign.
Yep.
So that is what Cohen gives us.
Yes.
He just invalidates that entire question.
Yes, yeah.
Then, and that's a good thing, as you're about to discover, then he shows us that Trump had to give permission for the Stormy deal to happen, which goes to Trump's intention.
Yes.
Question. What in substance did you discuss with him on these two calls? Cohen, I want to ensure that once again he approved what I was doing because I required approval from him on all of this. That's what the sum and substance of the conversation was, laying out exactly what was going to happen, what was being done in order to ensure the story didn't get sold to Daily Mail or somebody else. Question. Did you let him know you were going across the street and you were going to get the account set up and make the payment? Cohen, yes, ma'am. Question, would you have made that payment to Stormy Daniels without getting a sign-off from Trump? No. Why not? Because everything required Mr. Trump's sign-off. On top of that, I want the money back. And he also gives you that Trump knew that Cohen was going to be paid his legal services and approved of it. Question, and so it was stated, did Mr. Weisselberg state in front of Mr. Trump that you were going to receive $420,000 over the course of 12 months? Yes. And what, if anything, did Mr. Trump say at that time? He approved it. He also said, this is going to be one heck of a ride in D.C. And did Mr. Weisselberg say in front of Mr. Trump that those monthly payments would be, like a retainer for legal services? Yes. And then Cohen tells what he did to get those legal service payments, inverted commas, in 2017. Nothing. Question. Did you do in the year 2017 any work for Mr. Trump or his wife, Melania Trump? Answer, minimal. Was it a substantial amount of time he spent on that? No, ma'am. And did you send a bill or an invoice to Mr. Trump or the Trump organization for that work? No, ma'am. Why not? Well, I didn't expect to be paid on it, but it wasn't enough work to have me send an invoice. If you had to characterize or estimate the number of hours that you spent in the year 2017 doing any sort of work, legal or these quasi-legal matters, what would be the total number of hours that you would estimate? Less than 10.
Wow.
Now, did you bill for any of those matters? No, ma'am. Was the $420,000 that you received from Mr. Trump and from the Revocable Trust, did that have anything to do with the minimal amount of work that you did for Mr. Trump in 2017? No, ma'am. And then, comparatively, did you do more work in 2018? More legal work in 2018 for Mr. Trump, or more in 2017? It'd be more in 2018. Did you get paid anything in 2018 from Mr. Trump or the Darren organizer, or the Trump organization?
The Darren organizer.
No, ma'am. And did you bill for any of the work that you did for Mr. Trump in 2018? No, ma'am. So I'm really glad. So this is why I'm really, really grateful for Darren's work, because you don't read many transcripts of this stuff.
No.
And I wanted to read you the full transcripts of this because it's really damning.
Yes.
It's more damning than you'd think from reading the news articles.
Yeah, yeah.
So in summary, we know now that campaign finance laws were willfully violated. That's just, if you believe Cohen.
Yes.
They were willfully violated.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Trump knew that those transactions existed.
Yes.
The question, I suppose, that still remains is, did Trump know that those transactions were actually breaching campaign finance law? And does that question even matter necessarily, depending on which law they're charging him with?
Yeah.
I don't know. And the judge's instructions will be interesting on that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's going to be a relevant question in the appeal, I promise you that.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's the hardest part to prove. But other than that single
yeah.
question, I think the rest is taken care of, if you believe Cohen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, this to me is the first time that I've actually thought maybe the evidence really does support the prosecution in ways that people are going to be able to understand.
If you believe Cohen.
If you believe Cohen.
if you don't believe Cohen,
that is
then
the
you got a
critical thing. Yes.
Yeah. Some correspondence here. James says, you've probably convinced me that the current trial will be appealed and the appeal might see a conviction overturned. So why don't the prosecutors adopt Trump's strategy of delay, and hold off hearing the appeal until after the election? That way, the US go to the election with a conviction against Trump's name alongside the other results which are currently under appeal. James, you're very sneaky, but that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
No one needs to try for that to happen.
No.
There's no other choice. The appeal will be next year.
Yeah.
That's how long these things take.
Yeah.
This is the upside for Trump of how long the legal process takes, is that it's easy to push things past the election.
Yep.
The downside for Trump is that appeals get pushed past the election
Yes,
as well.
yeah.
So that's what's going to happen. If Trump's convicted, he's carrying that to the election. That's a fact.
Yeah.
This is the best correspondence ever.
Okay.
Okay. I was asking about what those tech services were.
Yes.
That Cohen got paid $50K for. I said,
Yes.
Could that be legal services?
Yeah.
I said, I don't know. David is one of our most prolific commenters. He's a really good commenter. He comes up with some really good stuff. And I've said to him in the past, I've apologized to David in the past. I've said, you got such great detail, mate, but I just can't fit this stuff on air.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I could fit this on air.
Okay.
Because David has pointed us to the truth.
Okay.
And it's extremely
This is the most built-up correspondence in history.
You
Okay.
wait. This is so good.
Okay.
This is so good. Allow me to quote a Wall Street Journal story from January 17th, 2019. Headline, Cohen hired IT firm to rig early CNBC drudge polls to favour Trump. Prosecutors wrote in a charging document that when Mr. Cohen asked Trump Organization executives for a $130,000 reimbursement for a hush payment, he made to Stephanie Clifford, the porn actress known as Stormy Daniels. He also scrawled a handwritten note asking for $50,000, he said, he spent on tech services to aid Mr. Trump's campaign. Prosecutors didn't name the company providing those services, but people familiar with the matter say it was Redfinch. Redfinch? Who's Redfinch, you might ask? Redfinch is a small company run by a guy called John Gorga. In January 2014, Mr. Cohen employed Gorga to help Mr. Trump score well in a CNBC online poll to identify the country's top business leaders by writing a computer script to repeatedly vote for Trump. Mr. Gorga was unable to get Mr. Trump into the top 100 candidates.
Wow.
Even when it was rigging it, he couldn't get Trump in the top 100 business leaders in 2014. In February 2015, as Mr. Trump prepared to enter the presidential race, Mr. Cohen asked him to do the same for a Drudge Report poll of potential Republican candidates. Mr. Gorga said Mr. Trump ranked fifth with about 24,000 votes, or 5% of the total. Isn't that lovely?
Mike, I was just going to say,
There you go.
The Peppers, there are going to be some of them who don't even know what the Drudge Report is.
Sure.
Although I think there are going to be a lot of Peppers who really know what the Drudge Report, what the Drudge Report is. The Drudge Report was, I would say, the product of an internet that had fewer focal points. Well, that actually had major focal points in it, and Drudge Report was one of them.
Yeah.
So Drudge Report was I don't know if it even still exists.
It does. It's actually doing really well these days.
Okay.
It's come back.
Sort of right-leaning clearinghouse of political news, that because it was one of the first places that became one of these clearinghouses of here are all the relevant political headlines, he had a huge following, and it was one of these things that anything that he linked to, the traffic would spike massively. So people were actively fighting for Drudge links.
Yeah.
And there was a time when getting on Drudge was a really, really important thing. My sense was just the internet became so diffuse, especially with like Twitter started fulfilling the role that Drudge had once. But that would make sense if it's come back because people are going away from Twitter. But anyway, that is what Drudge was.
I'm glad you paused for that explanation because we now get to the best bit.
Okay.
it's great.
Couldn't rig a Drudge poll. Okay.
No, yeah.
Yep.
Then 2015, Gorga showed up to be paid. He was supposed to be paid $50,000 for all this work. It's 2015 note.
Yeah.
Remember, the tech services was 2017.
Yes.
Right? When he showed up, Michael Cohen gave him a blue Walmart bag containing between $12,000 and $13,000 in cash and a boxing glove that Mr. Cohen said had been worn by a Brazilian mixed martial arts fighter once. And then Cohen claimed the $50,000 from Trump anyway in 2017 as a reimbursement. Those were the tech services.
Wow.
So he made 37 grand off this guy. But he didn't give up a boxing glove.
Minus the cost of the,
Yes. But that's not the best part. I'm leaving the best part till the end.
Yeah.
This is another quote from that same article. During the presidential race, Mr. Cohen also asked Mr. Gorga to create a Twitter account called Women for Cohen. The account, created in May 2016 and run by a female friend of Mr. Gorga, described Mr. Cohen as a sex symbol, praised his looks and character, and promoted his appearances and statements boosting Mr. Trump's candidacy. That account, Dave, is still up. And it has 198 followers. You can look at it right now. Women for Cohen. You might want to follow it. See what they have to say. I haven't seen anything since 2022. I love that so much. Thank you so much, David, for that wonderful correspondence.
That was so great. And look, since we've had mention of a Brazilian mixed martial arts artist, I just want to do a bit of a crossover from an earlier theme.
Yeah.
Okay, because this was an event that rocked the mixed martial arts world a few weeks ago.
Oh, yeah?
Okay, so I'll read from a CNN article. Brazilian UFC fighter Renato Moicano had just rallied back from an early round beating to win a lightweight bout this month when he grabbed a mic to shout about his favourite economist. I love private property, and let me tell you something. If you care about your country, read Ludwig von Mises and the 6 Lessons of the Austrian School. Moicano, his cheekbone bloodied, roared along with a pair of profanities.
A libertarian mixed martial arts?
A libertarian MMA fighter.
Just imagine how much people hate him when you combine MMA with libertarian.
So anyway, that's,
That is good stuff.
Broadening the reach of von Mises. Von Mises, by the way, believed that any kind of empirical verification of anything was the road to communism.
Just a reminder, folks, that Twitter account is Women for Cohen. Not woman, women. There are multiple women, 198 of them apparently. Women for Cohen. Remember, ladies love Cohen. Okay, so that's that. And then finally, on the correspondent level, there's a whole bunch of correspondents who are concerned about my personal expenses, campaign expenses issue, which I'll now talk about.
Okay.
I've said a few times that my understanding of campaign finance law is if Stormy Daniels was paid off at all because of Melania, then it's not a campaign expense.
Yep.
A lot of you have heard otherwise. Warrior Queen, Anya, Ozflip, Ilya, Daniel, and more. Daniel provided a reference, which I was very thankful for. Thank you, Daniel, for that. It was a podcast from Andrew Weissman and Mary McCord called Prosecuting Donald Trump from 8th of May on YouTube. I'll just play you what they have to say about this exact issue.
What if Donald Trump was thinking 50%, this hypothetically, he was thinking about the campaign as to why hush money payments should be made to keep the story away from the electorate? And what if he was thinking 50% that he was worried about his wife? I mean, you could tinker with the hypothetical. Right. So it might be useful for people to understand the law. So what's your understanding of how the judge will instruct the jury on that?
So we haven't seen jury instructions yet in this case, but generally in cases like burglary, like federal election crimes where there can be mixed motives, the jury is usually instructed that the government doesn't have to prove that the intent, like just take this case, the intent to conceal some other crime was the sole purpose or the sole motive of the person. And he will probably instruct that people rarely have, act with a single purpose in mind. Oftentimes there are mixed motives, and mixed motives are okay. The government just has to prove that one of the motives really was to commit this other crime, and that he wouldn't have sort of not done the thing at all, but except to commit the other crime. That has to have been a driving force, even if it was not the sole driving force. So the upshot of all that is jurors don't have to think that Mr. Trump didn't care about whether his wife knew or not. They don't have to think the only thing he cared about was covering up election fraud or federal election campaign finance violations or tax fraud. They can think he wanted to cover that up. And you know what? He really probably didn't want Melania to know about this either.
So they're suggesting that the prosecution have to prove that campaign finance was one of the driving forces, but not necessarily the sole driving force.
Yeah.
Okay.
I assume that they're more legally qualified to talk about this than we are.
Without doubt. Andrew Weissman and Mary McCoy are two of the absolute experts when it comes to law in America.
Yeah.
They are both, let's be honest, Democrats.
Okay.
But they are also super professional.
Okay. While
I would not necessarily trust their political judgment.
Yep.
I think when they're talking about the law, you should listen to them.
Okay.
They seem to be suggesting, though, that there's a grey zone depending on what the judge's instructions are. And that worries me because we know that Trump is going to take this to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
For sure, if he's convicted.
Yes.
Right? And those instructions are going to be evaluated by a higher court at some point.
Yeah.
Okay, so it doesn't matter if the judge gives instructions that
that rule out this issue.
Yes, yeah.
If those instructions then get reevaluated.
Yeah.
Right? Like I said, I think Cohen, if you believe Cohen, this issue's not a
yeah.
non-starter anyway. But then there's a guy called Bradley Smith, who's an ex-Federal Election Commission chair.
Yep.
So he should know. He's also a conservative, and he's quite a partisan conservative.
Okay, yes.
He is actually likely to be testifying in this trial.
Okay.
But I think the judge is stopping him from testifying on this exact question.
Oh, okay.
So the defense are trying to get him to testify on this question because they want his help on this issue. But this is what he says. He says, the governing statute, the Federal Election Campaign Act, provides a contribution is any donation made for the purpose of influencing any campaign for federal office. Sounds simple, but then he says, the Supreme Court has repeatedly held that because campaign finance laws infringe on core First Amendment activity, they can't be dependent on vague subjective interpretations. Accordingly, the clause for the purpose of influencing any federal election is an objective standard. As another section of statute states, an obligation isn't a campaign expenditure if it exists irrespective of the campaign. In other words, campaign funds pay for campaigning. The campaign manager's salary, ads, campaign travel, venues for rallies, polling, and so on. They don't pay for personal expenses not created by the act of campaigning, even if the candidate intends for them to benefit the campaign. The statute's objective nature is demonstrated by a non-inclusive list of things that campaign funds may not be spent on, no matter how much they might benefit or be intended to benefit a campaign. For example, if a candidate wants to look good in a debate and purchases a $4,000 suit he would never have bought if he wasn't running for office, that is to say, he buys it with the subjective intent to influence an election, it still can't be purchased with campaign funds because he would have to buy clothing anyway.
Okay.
A country club membership can't be purchased with campaign funds, no matter how much the candidate intends for it to benefit his campaign by giving them a place to schmooze donors. Candidates with substantial business interests, such as Mr. Trump, will frequently find themselves facing lawsuits, some merited, some not. If such a candidate were to instruct his company's legal counsel to settle them, the settlement payments would subjectively be made to influence an election. Legally, however, such payments couldn't be made with campaign funds and would have to be made by the company or the candidate personally because the underlying obligation wasn't created by the act of campaigning.
Okay.
So you can see how this applies to Stormy Daniels. He's saying if Trump would have to pay off Stormy Daniels anyway, even without the campaign, then that's not a campaign expense. That's a higher bar to clear than the Wiseman and McCord bar. But do we trust this guy? I don't know.
Okay.
Anna Kaminsky was the professor of law from New York Law School. I interviewed this week on the show to talk about Michael Cohen. I thought, screw it, I'm just going to ask her.
Yeah.
And I played you an edited version on the Wednesday show. This is the unedited response from her. I asked her 2 questions about this. This is the response. Professor, such a critical part of this case is whether the hush money should be properly considered a campaign expense for Trump or a personal expense. So what standard does the prosecution team need to meet to show that the hush money should have been declared a campaign expense?
Right. So what they have to prove is they have to show that however these documents were recorded in the Trump organization, that they were done so fraudulently, right? And that they have to show this intent to defraud. So our understanding is that what the prosecution has said is that these were recorded in many places as reimbursement, or not as reimbursement, but rather as attorney's fees. But in fact, according to the prosecution, they were reimbursement for Cohen paying this hush money. And so that's where the fraudulent intent comes in.
So just to clarify, Trump's going to argue that he paid the hush money because he was worried about Melania's feelings. So it was a personal expense he didn't have to declare as a campaign expense. So does he just need to show that his concerns about Melania were maybe part of his considerations? Or is he guilty unless he was only thinking about Melania?
Well, so ultimately that's going to be up to the jury. But the real question here is, was the underlying crime, right? Was the underlying crime, which the prosecutors have been leaning towards this conspiracy to unlawfully affect the election. If there was any part of this that had to do with unlawfully affecting the election, then the idea that it was also for something else is just ancillary. So if it was to unlawfully affect the election and also to shield his wife, it's still illegal. However, if it was only done in the interest of his family and his wife, that would not support the campaign election fraud idea, and therefore it would not rise to the felony level.
So you can make up your own mind on that, okay? I feel that that's closer to the Weiss-McCord standard. Either way, the good news is, like I've said, if the jury believes Michael Cohen, not the issue. And if they don't believe Michael Cohen, prosecution has more problems than this.
Yeah.
So I actually don't think this is going to be an issue after all this.
All right.
But for those who care,
you shed a lot of blood to get to that point.
I know, but people care about this stuff. So for those who do care, you'd make up your own mind. I actually feel it's a real grey area. And the Supreme Court could end up deciding it. But anyway, we'll see.
In conclusion, Libya is a land of contrasts.
Very good. Okay, let's go on. What's your next one? Your next one's going to be scrolling down all the stuff.
The oil meeting.
Yeah. Let's go. RFK, oil meeting, all that kind of stuff. Just whatever. Pick whatever you want out of there.
Yeah. Okay. So Trump had a meeting with oil executives at Mar-a-Lago. Yeah. A lot of the biggest companies were represented there, including ExxonMobil and Chevron, and the reports from out of that meeting, which aren't really being disputed, that Trump said that collectively they should donate $1 billion to his campaign.
Why should they do that, Dave?
And they came to him with a list of things that they would want him to do if he became president, which includes dismantling, basically dismantling large parts of Biden's push towards green energy.
Yep.
And, I mean, the usual kinds of stuff in terms of deregulating drilling and all of that sort of stuff.
Sure.
Now, that immediately raises the question of is this bribery? Is this soliciting a bribe, essentially?
What do you think?
No, I don't think it is. Yep. I think it's bad, but I don't think it's soliciting a bribe.
Why not?
Okay, so, first of all, as Chaz has explained many, many times, actual campaign donations cannot be anywhere near that big. Yeah. They have to be much, much more. We're talking about in the single-digit thousands.
Yeah,
not in the billions.
If they're giving that much money, it has to go to a super
PAC. Yeah. Now, yes, okay. Yeah. So you can donate that to a super PAC, but a candidate cannot solicit funds for a super PAC.
So Trump might be breaking the rules.
Yeah. So the argument is that Trump might actually be breaking the rules there.
Yeah.
Or
he's asking for them to find 25,000 mates,
friends,
to give 3,300 each.
Yeah.
Yes.
But of course, for it to be a bribe, there has to be this explicit quid pro quo, as we talked about many years ago. Now, that would be where the argument falls apart, because the things that they were asking Trump to do are the things that they would expect any Republican to do.
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. I mean, this is when administrations change between Republican and Democratic. Usually one of the first things that happens by executive order are either the expansion or the rollback of drilling, of drilling on federal land. This usually happens within the first few days.
Yeah.
So they could absolutely count on that to happen within the first few days. Anyway, Trump has been very vocal about wanting to dismantle not just parts of the green energy agenda, but the entire thing. This is clearly not a case of Trump's asking for money in order to do something that he wouldn't do otherwise. So, no, I don't think that this meets the standard of bribery at all. The comparisons to Teapot Dome are a bit wayward, but Teapot Dome's a fun thing to talk about, so we will anyway. So this happened during the war.
Just before you do, let me just say, I agree with you.
Yes.
I think what Trump did here was he said, find a way to give me as much money as you can.
Yes,
$1 billion is like a Dr. Evil kind of number.
Yes,
whatever. $1 billion.
Yes.
Give me as much money as you can, because if I get in, the shit I'm going to do.
Yes,
it's going to be everything you want.
Yes.
And that's not a bribe. That's a fact.
Yeah. And look, he might have technically broken some rule, but the other thing was he he was. The reporting I've read says it was far more of a suggestion than an actual demand.
Sure.
But
Anyway, go on about Teapot.
Okay, Teapot Dome. So this happened during Warren Harding's presidency.
Yep.
Warren Harding's often regarded as the worst president of the 20th century. Now, there's some stiff competition around this. Herbert Hoover's the one who's often also named as well. But there are revisionist views around Herbert Hoover.
I was going to say, there's Woodrow Wilson's got a few
inverted
commas fans developing over the years as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, go on.
Actually, I read this really interesting book it's an old book by William Appleman Williams called The Tragedy of American Diplomacy that suggests Hoover was way better than people give him credit for. But anyway, leaving that issue aside, one of the reasons why Warren Harding is often considered the worst is a sort of combination of bad policy, blatant racism, and the fact that he's kind of been forgotten as well. There is a novel by Robert Plunket called My Search for Warren Harding, which I would highly recommend.
Is it on the list?
I'll put it on the
Okay.
I'll put it on the list.
Okay.
Although if you do read it in the latest edition that's been published, make sure you actually read the introduction first. Otherwise, you're in for a bit of a shock.
Sure.
But anyway, so this happened during the Harding administration, and it was his Secretary of the Interior was basically selling off the exploration leases to the Wyoming, the Teapot Dome exploration area. That had been set aside by President Taft for the Strategic Naval Oil Reserve. So it was very important. It was the government that was going to be paying for it. There was a no-bid contract process where contracts was basically sold off very lightly. So that was blatant bribery.
Yeah.
That was, you are going to get this contract if you give me money.
Okay.
Bribery.
Yeah.
Really, the only similarity between that and this is the fact that oil was, the fact that oil people were involved. So this isn't a bribery case, but first of all, it really shows you which side of politics the fossil fuel industry is on. Having said that, they will donate to anybody who they think will further their interests, such as number one recipient of fossil fuel donations by a huge margin in recent years, Senator Joe Manchin.
Of course.
Of Democrat of West Virginia. But the point is that this is exactly what you would expect. And it's bad, like it's not good at all. These guys probably will donate I don't think they'll donate $1 billion, but they are going to donate quite a lot.
I'm sure they will.
To super PACs to get Trump reelected. But this does not rise to the standard of bribery. Rather, this is just a particularly shitty version of democracy at work.
Can I just ask, why was the Teapot Dome called the Teapot Dome? Like that's a strange name. The Teapot Dome is sort of.
I imagined it was because of the shape of the rock formation.
But what's a dome in terms of rock formation?
Like, if you can picture a teapot, the lid of it is like this dome shape.
Sure, yeah.
With a little thing.
Yeah, but in terms
of
of rocks, what are we talking about? We're talking like it's just it's like a hill.
Yeah,
they call it a Teapot Dome.
Well, look, there aren't that many poetic names that you can come up with for hills that are just a normal hill shape.
Because whenever I think of Teapot Dome, I always think of like just a really, really piss weak sponsor for a stadium. Remember what was the one in North Queensland, like 1-800-SMILES Stadium?
1-800-SMILES Stadium.
The Teapot Dome was the 1-800-SMILES Stadium of the 20s, as far as I'm concerned. It's just really piss weak sponsorship.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, I'll accept your explanation. I'm sure my image is incorrect.
Okay.
Keep on going, Dave. Talk us about RFK.
Yeah. So RFK is, as we said, taking votes from both candidates. Yes. And everything that he says now is beginning to worry candidates one way or the other. And now he's being pressed on his views on certain issues. So abortion is the most recent one, which he was pressed on. And he appeared to give a radically expansive answer to the question about the circumstances under which he supported abortion. Like, certainly way more than you would normally hear from a presidential candidate.
I'll play it to you now.
My belief is we should leave it to the woman. We shouldn't have government involved.
Even if it's full term?
Even if it's full term.
Okay.
So that was an interview with Sage Steele.
Yes.
She's a former
ESPN.
Former ESPN. Yeah, she produced one of the greatest moments in ESPN history on this basketball show when Bill Simmons, one of the most noxious media personalities in America, was on this show, like for no real reason other than that he's a powerful media personality. He was also a huge basketball fan. And he started whining on the panel about not being allowed to talk enough. Like, this is a man whose annual output of words probably numbers in the hundreds of millions, if not billions. I've never seen this before on a sports panel. Like, sports panels thrive on, like, good-natured jocularity and stuff. And here you've got, like, the one non-athlete on the panel, just this white media guy whining about not getting to talk enough.
So
and
like the sports version of Bill Ackman.
Yes. And her eye roll is one of the greatest moments in the history of ESPN. Probably why she no longer works at ESPN. Anyway, so he has been, he realized that was a more expansive answer than is usually usually imagined is what will come out of the mouth of a serious presidential candidate. So he has since revised that, but in incredibly vague terms.
Yes.
So he says there's an emerging consensus that there should be some limit. Was it some limit of some number of weeks?
I got it.
Yeah.
I support the emerging consensus that abortion should be unrestricted up until a certain point. I believe that point should be when the baby is viable outside the womb. So viability.
Okay, look, which is good.
Yeah.
That's not the emerging consensus. That's the consensus that existed for 50 years,
Yes.
which was blown apart by Roe versus Wade.
Yes.
Yeah, but anyway, okay. But yes, so he has managed to circle back to a kind of reasonable point on that. Now, obviously, if he had actually stuck to his really expansive guns on abortion, who do you think that would have hurt more?
I would have thought it would have to hurt Biden, wouldn't it?
That's what I thought. Yes.
Yeah.
No, you would think that, like, that would, Biden is the liberal on abortion.
Totally.
In this, you would think someone being liberal on abortion, voters who are swaying between the two, that puts them in the camp. But then I also did think about all of these ballot measures that have been held in conservative states where more than 50% of people voted to enshrine abortion in it.
Yeah.
So there are right-wing pro-abortion people out there.
Well, that's true.
Who might otherwise be voting for Trump.
Yeah.
This is one of the reasons why it's actually so hard to predict who he's going to siphon more votes from, because he's appealing to all of these weird little niches that are taking votes away potentially from both.
Well, he's appealing to. He's appealing to the 20% of people who think Biden's at fault.
Yes.
For Roe versus, because those are the people who are stupid enough to vote for RFK.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, all political logic would suggest that would take more from Biden, but at the same time, like there could be Trump voters who are actually I agree with this guy on abortion and vaccination. Yeah.
I reckon. I mean, you've told the second half of the story there because that's not that the Sage Steele position was not his first position.
Yeah.
He's been struggling for a little while. like last year he suggested a 3-month limit at a state fair.
What?
Yeah.
At a state fair.
At a state fair.
Which state fair was it?
I think it was Iowa.
Of course.
Yeah, and he says
high on corn fumes.
A 3-month limit, and then the next day, his spokesperson said Mr. Kennedy misunderstood a question posed to him by an NBC reporter in a crowded, noisy exhibit hall at the Iowa State Fair.
When his eyes were bulging from steroids.
And the spokesperson clarified that Kennedy's stance on abortion has always been the woman's right to choose. So that's the Sage Steele position.
Yeah.
He said Kennedy, the spokesperson said Kennedy does not support legislation banning abortion at all.
Mm.
Then, the day after that, this came out.
Would you sign a federal protection to protect the rights that were in the Roe precedent if you were president?
I believe that a decision to abort a child should be up to the women during the first 3 months of life.
So you would cap it at 15 weeks?
Yes.
Or 21
Yes.
weeks?
Yeah, for 3 months.
So 3 months. You would sign a federal cap on that?
Yes, I would.
You could tell, frantically doing the maths in his head. How many weeks is 3 months?
This is not a man who spent a lot of time thinking about his position on abortion. But yeah, and for those who are better at maths than RFK, you would have noted that 3 months is 12 weeks.
Yes.
And he's saying he seems to not.
Well, maybe 13.
Yeah. He seems to not be quite sure whether it's 15 weeks or 21 weeks.
Yeah.
Or he's got
Wasn't
no
helped
idea.
by the interviewer who was. But that's
true.
her right to, to confuse him.
The bottom line, he should know what his policy is.
He should know what his
on
policy
abortion.
is. This is not like it's a minor issue.
No. And so that was the latest position
Yeah, yeah.
until just now was
Yeah,
stage
yeah,
2.
yeah.
He went back to the unrestricted
Yeah.
and then now back to viability, which is like
Wow.
22 weeks.
Yeah.
Right. So he's all over the shop, right?
He's all over the shop.
But for that reason, my take on this
Yeah.
is that no one who cares about abortion is voting for RFK.
Okay.
I think it's pretty clear if you care about abortion,
Yeah.
whatever your position is,
Yes.
this is not your man.
All right.
So,
But an issue he has been very consistent on.
what's that?
Vaccination.
Oh, yeah, he's been consistent on that.
Yeah.
Very clear about that.
Very clear on that. I think anybody who's watched RFK, no matter how intently or casually, knows he is very consistent on vaccination.
Yes.
But you know who doesn't think that he's very consistent on vaccination?
Oh, I know the answer to this.
Donald J. Trump. Donald Trump is warning his followers on social media that Robert Kennedy is not actually an anti-vaxxer.
And by the way, he said the other night that vaccines are fine. He said it on a show, a television show, that vaccines are fine. He's all for them. And that's what he said. And for those of you that want to vote because you think he's an anti-vaxxer, he's not really an anti-vaxxer. That's only his political moment. He said it the other night. He's okay with the vaccine. Their energy costs are the highest in the United States, in New York State. And
he doesn't know what he's reading.
No.
he just moves on to energy.
Their energy costs, did not miss a beat. It was
the energy costs of vaccines. He's just got no idea what he's reading.
It reminded me, when Craig Rook asked last week, has Trump ever finished a sentence? No, there is only one sentence. It occasionally gets interrupted by sleep. But there is only one sentence.
Yeah, but anyway, so apparently RFK said that he liked vaccines on a show. I think RFK and Trump went to the same details consultants.
Yes.
Tell them just never give any.
Yeah. But what I'm interested there is Trump explicitly trying to position himself as the anti-vaxxer candidate? I mean, Trump also has this tortured relationship with vaccines, you may remember from back in 2020, because he thought that vaccines would be the magic bullet for everything to do with COVID, and that was how he was trying to sell them.
Yeah.
And as we noted at the time, the Trump administration's vaccine response was by far the best thing they actually did. During COVID, the whole world benefited from Operation Warp Speed.
Yep.
It was one of the reasons why vaccines were developed far more quickly than they usually are for novel diseases during pandemics. And for all the problems that vaccines have had, they really had a very significant effect on mitigating the pandemic. And Trump was right behind, even all the way through that year, Trump was promoting vaccines as the solution. No matter how much skepticism he evinced about any other part of the pandemic, and he was skeptical about basically every other thing. No, vaccines were always going to be the solution. And then sort of after his presidency ended, he wasn't really able to tout this as one of his major achievements because all of his supporters have been so poisoned by all of the skepticism about about COVID that they weren't prepared to accept the reality of vaccines. So is he an anti-vaxxer now, is what I want to know. Is he against his own single good achievement as president?
It's a good question. I mean, I should say, I know that there's been some revisionism about Operation Warp Speed. Like there are some people who have said, well, hang on, most of that work had been done
long before, on the vaccines were done long before Operation Warp Speed. He's taking credit for something other people did. But you know what? That's how the presidency works.
Yes. Yeah.
If you put serious money into something and you promote the hell out of it, you take credit for it. That's how it works, even if it would have happened anyway. So I'll give him credit for it, even if he's not responsible.
Yeah.
I don't care. That's a good thing from his presidency.
Yes.
But to answer your question, it's a really interesting situation because like I told you before, I think it was you that I told this last week, that there was a poll there where Trump lost serious skin when people pointed out that RFK was skeptical about vaccines.
Yeah.
He lost serious skin from Republicans.
Yeah.
And does Trump go all the way to anti-vax to try and head them off at the pass? I really hope not, because that would be very depressing.
It would be.
Because, of course, if they go anti-vax on COVID, they're going to go anti-vax on everything else. Or they'll go anti-vax on measles. They won't distinguish.
No, they won't.
Yeah. So.
You might remember Trump was flirting with hardcore anti-vax stuff early in his presidency. In fact, even during his 2016 campaign. RFK, do you remember, offered to chair a commission on vaccines.
Yes.
For the Trump administration.
Yeah. Strangely, he didn't offer to chair a commission on abortions.
No.
Given his lifelong interest in that issue.
Yeah.
But no, I do remember that. Yeah, it's funny how that turned out. But yeah, I don't know where it's going to go. But yeah, I'm nervous. I've got real trepidation when I saw that clip of Trump.
Yeah.
Saying he's not a real anti-vaxxer. I was like, oh my God. I mean, it's also classic Trump. Like most people would dance around and go, he's inconsistent on vaccines. But Trump goes, no, he's not a real anti-vaxxer, as if being an anti-vaxxer is a great thing.
And I mean, some of the stuff that Trump has been suggesting, like not a dime to schools that have vaccine mandates.
Yeah.
And he's not just talking about COVID vaccine mandates there. He's talking about, vaccine mandates for a lot of childhood diseases are quite common in the United States. And we're not just talking about deep blue states there either. We're talking about places like Texas.
Yep.
So I don't know what he is talking about there. And people forget actually how easily childhood diseases that you don't even think about can come back and do come back when herd immunity reaches a not even a very low level, just a bit below what it needs to be. There have been California measles outbreaks in recent years. There have been whooping cough outbreaks in Australia in recent years. That happens just when herd immunity falls a little bit below what it needs to be.
Talking about moronic culture war campaigning.
Yes.
Ron DeSantis, come on down.
Oh, yes.
Ron DeSantis in Florida have just banned the sale of lab-grown meat. And he is so proud of it.
So the bill that I'm going to sign today is going to say, basically, take your fake lab-grown meat elsewhere. We're not doing that in the state of Florida. And this group, the World Economic Forum, they've not only told you that the consumption of meat is, quote, the source of greenhouse gas and climate change. Obviously, they've said that. They also want you to believe that consuming insects is a, quote, overlooked source of protein and a way to battle climate change. Now, I'm sure they'll say, hey, wait a minute. Just hear us out before you say yuck. And to that I say, Florida has heard enough on that.
Yeah, take that. We don't want to hear your arguments. Now, firstly, I'm not sure it's up to DeSantis to decide what Florida has heard enough of.
No.
Secondly, if all these things are so bad, why does he need to ban them? Why can't people make up their own minds?
Yeah.
He seems very insecure.
Yeah.
Thirdly, how does banning lab-grown meat stop you eating insects? I don't see the connection. I mean, for the record, he's right that the World Economic Forum have suggested eating insects. That is true. That's a suggestion.
But this is really old?
Yeah.
I remember hearing far more extreme attacks on that, saying the World Economic Forum has plans to force everyone to eat insects.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That's the difference. The World Economic Forum is giving you a choice.
Yes.
Whereas the free state of Florida is not.
All right. Okay. So let me just take a second to tell you what lab grown meat is.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you might be wondering, because he spent 1 second on it before he went on to eating insects.
Yeah.
It's not that Impossible Burger stuff you get from Hungry Jack's. It's not that. That's plant-based meat.
Mm-hmm.
For Americans listening, Burger King. Yeah. In Australia, we call Burger King Hungry Jack's. It's very weird.
In about 50% of cases.
I know, it's so weird.
Weird division.
Yeah, it's weird. Anyway, don't get started on that. It's Australia's oddest marketing trend.
Yeah.
Lab-grown meat was invented in 2013. A Dutch scientist first cultivated meat in a lab for humans. They take a sample from the actual animal and then they feed the sample nutrients and grow it in a bioreactor.
Yeah.
So it's actual meat tissue.
Yes.
This is real meat.
Yeah.
Now, you could prefer lab-grown meat. You could prefer real meat. It's up to you. It doesn't matter. But the theory is that it's more environmentally friendly because animal agriculture accounts for 15 to 20% of global greenhouse gas emissions. These are the arguments that he does want to hear.
Yeah.
Also, a lot of air and water pollution as well.
Yeah. A lot of deforestation.
Totally.
Yep.
It's obviously less cruel to animals as well.
Yeah.
And it's actually healthier for you as well because zero fat, unless you want it. Unless you want the fat. You choose.
I do want the fat.
Yeah, that's fine. You can have it. That's fine. I'm not going to take it from you. I'm not Ron DeSantis. You can have the fat.
Yeah.
So,
I'm just explaining here my own reluctance to get on the wave of the future of lab-grown meat.
That's okay. You don't need to buy it.
I want the fat.
You don't need to buy it. You don't have to move to Florida, mate. I'll let you buy whatever meat you like.
Jez. Yeah.
But what does DeSantis have to say about all these arguments I just told you?
These will be people who will lecture the rest of us about things like global warming. They will say that, you can't drive a internal combustion engine vehicle. They'll say that agriculture is bad. Meanwhile, they're flying to Davos in their private jets, and they're living like they would ever want to live. So this is really a vision of imposing restrictions on freedoms for everyday people, while these elites are effectively pulling the strings, calling the shots, and doing whatever the hell they want to do in their own lives. And we've said in Florida, these folks at like the World Economic Forum in Davos that they meet and they scheme, those policies are dead on arrival in the state of Florida.
What the fuck does that have to do with lab-grown meat?
I know. He's stopped the scheming. That's what he's done. So, look, in other words, he doesn't care about lab-grown meat at all.
No.
Obviously. He just cares about sticking it to the Davos crowd.
Yeah.
Which he mentions Davos in this speech so much more than he mentions lab-grown meat.
Yes, yeah. By the way, just in case you're not clear, Davos is the World Economic Forum.
Yes. Yeah. So it's so whatever they want, the World Economic Forum want, he will oppose. That's his logic.
Yeah.
It's basically policy by schoolyard bully.
Do they even have an opinion on lab-grown meat?
I got no idea.
Yeah.
As if I give a shit what they have to say.
Yeah.
I have no more love for them than DeSantis does. But the difference is,
I kind of wish
I'm not
he was
obsessed with them like he is.
I kind of wish he was still in the primary campaign so that Trump could call him lab-grown meat.
He does look a bit like a meatball, doesn't he?
Yes, yeah, that came from some sort of artificial process.
Oh, what a jerk. Anyway, why not just let the market decide, you might
That's
wonder?
right.
That seems to be the conservative way forward on this. Oh, here's your answer.
It's not just a question of, they want to put this out there on the market. If some people like it, they can do it. That's not really what they're going for, because they know if that was put out there to compete with normal beef, that they would lose. So what they want to do is put that out there and then say, well, wait a minute, you can do this in a lab. You don't need to do the cattle. You don't need to do all this. So why don't you just phase that out? That's ultimately the goal. Now, they're not at the point where they're going to be able to execute that today. But I think part of being good stewards of these industries, of the state, of the public well-being, is to think forward and head off threats before they even come.
These people who don't have the power to stop him banning lab-grown meat before it even begins are so powerful, they will make you give up everything else.
Wow.
That makes a lot of sense.
No, Florida's going to be underwater before they have the power to do that.
That's another element of this as well.
I've got to say, so I personally have never been able to get into any meat substitute except vegan sausages.
Okay.
Yeah,
like that?
I developed a taste for these as an undergraduate when I was living with a vegan flatmate.
Yeah.
Who would get these vegan sausages, and I really enjoyed them for some reason. But maybe it's because a sausage is such an artificial thing in the first place. I say this as someone who loves sausages.
Sure.
Yeah. It was easy to kind of recreate, but never been able to get into any other form of substitute meat. But that's not to say that there's not a market for it.
Look, that's an interesting tale you got there, Dave. But I would say in response to that, get the hell out of my face, because in 20 years' time, someone is going to make me not have any other sausages because you're allowed to eat that sausage now. How dare you? Get back to Davos. You tyrant.
If anything,
you tyrant.
If anything, at least in this country, the sausage industry is stronger than it's ever been because of the twin powers of Bunnings and democratic elections.
That's true.
Yeah. Like, it's quite amazing how this sort of quite retrograde piece of meat has suddenly taken on this cultural symbolism. This even nationalist symbolism.
Oh, I would make DeSantis
I
proud.
would say this, like, there's a democracy's in danger if we endanger the sausage. Anyway, we've got off topic.
We have a little bit. But look, the important thing, the takeaway here is that DeSantis is essentially trying to protect Floridians from their own decisions in 20 years' time, which makes perfect sense. But obviously, in reality, this is about protectionism and the culture war. Obviously, Florida's got 15,000 cattle ranchers, and as an industry, they don't mind making the odd donation, just one or two. They're not even pretending it isn't about this. Florida's agricultural commissioner said, "We must protect our incredible farmers and the integrity of American agriculture. Lab-grown meat is a disgraceful attempt to undermine our proud traditions and prosperity, and is in direct opposition to authentic agriculture." DeSantis also said, "What we're protecting here is the cattle industry against acts of man, against an ideological agenda that wants to finger agriculture as the problem, that views things like raising cattle as destroying our climate." Please don't talk about fingering anything, Ron DeSantis. I don't want that image in my head. Just keep your fingers away from all orifices, please, Ron. And that's obviously all, of course, in addition to the protection that the agricultural industry already received, which we shouldn't forget. They're exempt from the Animal Welfare Act. Did you know that?
No.
They're exempt from the Clean Water Act. Did you know that? They're exempt from the Clean Air Act. They've got quite a hand. Each state has a right to farm law. What that means is rural people can't sue factory farms for pollution, odor, and other nuisances. Isn't that nice?
Yeah.
And about 10 states have passed ag-gag laws, which make it illegal to investigate animal abuse on farms. So that's nice as well. So as you can see, given what I just said about all those particular laws that are national, it's not just about Florida. Alabama just passed a similar bill banning lab-grown meat.
Yeah.
West Virginia, Kentucky, Arizona, and Tennessee are all debating similar legislation. In late January, John Tester and Mike Rounds announced a federal bill to ban cell-cultivated meat in school cafeterias. Annoyingly for me, because I've been liking this guy a bit recently, John Fetterman has also gone on board.
Yeah.
He tweeted out this. I'll read out.
John Fetterman is on the conservative side of just about any Democratic divide.
These days he is.
Yeah.
Pains me deeply to agree with Crash and Burn Ron, but I co-sign this. As a member of Senate Ag Dems and as some dude who would never serve that slop to my kids, I stand with our American ranchers and farmers. And they tweeted, "This is the thing that makes lab meat." There's a picture of that there. Look, it's a shiny machine. Oh, it's got tubes. Watch out. I mean, obviously there are heaps of scary looking machines in the standard meat production process. I don't need to show you because you're not a moron. Okay, so what difference does any of this make? That's the next question.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, obviously Ron DeSantis has been a jerk like he often is, but does this matter? Well, not much.
No.
Lab-grown meat isn't even available in America right now.
Yeah.
That's the punchline. 2 restaurants sold it in 2023, one in San Francisco, one in Washington, D.C. Neither is offering it this year. There's no stock at all. My take basically, what's your take on all this? What do you care?
No.
No, you just, I care. I'll tell you my take. Okay, first of all, either lab-grown meat's going to work or it isn't. Yeah. If it isn't, no problems. If it's going to work, it was never going to get started in Florida anyway. So who cares? Because Florida is not exactly the land of innovation. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, Ron. If it's going to get started, it'll get started in China or California.
Yes.
Let's face it.
Yep.
If it's China and it works, then that will just be one more future industry that Americans have dealt themselves from, dealt themselves away from. They've excluded themselves, because of backwards thinking, like, for instance, green energy.
Yep.
Like right now, they're panicking about the fact that China owns all the mines and all the materials for electric vehicles. And they go, oh, how did this happen? This happened because for the last 20 years, while people are saying, why don't you get behind this emerging industry? People are going, no, it's scary. And here's the result, right? The same thing could happen with lab-grown meat if China gets there, is the spearheading it. But, yeah, let's say California does. Eventually, America's going to get on board anyway.
Yeah.
Maybe or maybe not after they've surrendered the competitive disadvantage. Anyway, and the reason this sets me off, apart from the fact it's stupid, is because leaving aside climate change.
Yeah.
Leaving aside cruelty to animals.
Yes.
Leaving aside all that stuff.
Yeah.
I reckon it's really cool. I love lab-grown meat. Just imagine.
Have you ever had it?
No, because you can't get it anywhere.
Yeah.
But I love the idea of it. And I'll tell you why I love the idea of it. Because you have complete control over it. Just think about this. Think about this for a second. You can, if you want omega-3 in your meat, sure, whack it in there. If you want to have extra protein, go for it. Sprinkle some protein in there. If you want strawberry flavored meat, no problems. If you want orange meat with apple sprinkles, yeah, you can do that. You can do whatever the hell you want. Think about that. It'll be awesome.
I'm thinking about it. It's not appealing.
You can take my artificial meat out of my cold, dead hands. Damn it, Ron. I'm a big fan. My cold, dead Android hands.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then just as if that's not bad enough, he's followed up by I'm not sure if you saw this. He's banned all mentions of climate change in the state.
I did see that. I just want to come back to someone else that you mentioned, which is John Tester.
Yeah, sure.
And so we talked about this on Planet America, but I think it is just worth circling back to this point. Okay, why is John Tester doing something like this? Because John Tester is one of the Democrats who is in a potentially very tough Senate re-election race.
Yeah.
So John Tester and Sherrod Brown are considered two of the most vulnerable Democratic candidates. Ohio went Trump by 8 in 2020. Montana went Trump by, I don't even know how many.
By a lot.
Yeah. Well, not as much as some of the Mountain West, but by a huge amount, like by at least 12. However, the polling that's come out of those states, which admittedly is about 2 months old, showed them in the lead in their respective races, and actually with decent leads.
Yeah.
Sherrod Brown is being helped by the fact that Ohio nominated a lunatic, nominated Bernie Moreno, yet another victim of the Bernie Moreno is too conservative for Ohio.
16 points, Montana went by.
16 points. Yeah. John Tester, the last time I saw polling about him, the Republican candidate hadn't even been finalized.
Yeah.
So his lead on that might have reflected the fact that there wasn't even a Republican candidate. But nonetheless, he's actually in a good position. And these are both very popular candidates. They're both very populist candidates. They know the correct emphasis to put on the economy in these states. So as we were saying on the TV show, the Democrats' chances of winning the Senate actually at the moment don't look as remote as they once did. Like I would have once said it was about 1%.
Yeah.
I now think it's about 10%.
Well, and the limiting factor.
Yes.
Tell them what the limiting factor is.
The limiting factor is Biden.
Yes.
Okay. There is essentially no way that they can win more than 50 seats.
Yeah.
The way that the map looks is they're going to lose West Virginia. Once the personal vote of Joe Manchin is gone, it is widely considered that there is no way they can win.
They'd have to beat Rubio, and they're not going to beat Rubio.
Yeah. So West Virginia is gone. That brings them down to 50. Then there are these 6. So then there's Montana. There's Ohio. Then there's the 4 that we were talking about in those in those New York Times Siena polls. So that's Arizona, which is an open seat, Nevada, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. So it was at the start of the year. Just looking at that 6, it seemed impossible that one of those would not go Republican. At the moment, the polling actually suggests they all could go Democratic. And I don't think that's just weird polling, because some of this is coming from polls that shows Trump comfortably in the lead in these swing states. It's also consistent with the fact that Democrats now keep polling very well on congressional ballot polls. So in the House of Representatives as well, it looks like they might be in front. Now, I'm not sure how much conscious decision-making is going on here on the part of voters in terms of newspapers. When they write this up, they're always looking for voters who are going to say things like, I'm voting for this party for president, but for this party in the House and Senate just to balance them. I don't know how much of it is that and how much of it is incumbency advantage. I suspect it's it's going to be way more incumbency advantage. I don't think that many voters actually think that deliberately about their choices. But this is, because prior to this, I thought that the one certainty of this year was Republicans were winning the Senate. That's up in the air as well. Everything is up in the air. It is entirely plausible that either party could win all three. But the difference is Democrats will have to win the presidency in order to win the Senate, because they can't get more than 50. Yeah. Well, I mean, realistically, they can't. In terms, yes, there are some Republicans who have to defend their seats, but I think the one that was rated as most winnable for Democrats was Florida.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
So there's no way they're getting more than 50. They need the presidency in order to control the Senate.
I never would have thought that in a million years, that the thing that would stop the Democrats potentially keeping the Senate was the presidency.
Yes.
But there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. By the way, I want to talk about elections. One of the correspondence we got was a great request for us to talk about the Alan Lichtman 13 keys, which I think we definitely should.
Yeah.
Every 4 years we like to talk about that.
Yes, yeah.
But I knew we wouldn't fit it in this week's app. So I'll put it on the pin board for whoever asked that. We'll talk about that next week. That's a great question.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about Louisiana abortions?
I need to go.
You need to go. Well, that's fair enough. You've had a long haul today. Right?
Yes, yeah.
You got a little slice of my life.
Yes, I did.
Okay. Well, that's all right. We will. Let's leave that for now. I am going to do a Chaz Unleashed later on, because there is something which I should talk about, which is the Israeli weapons situation. So I'll say that for the Chaz Unleashed. And so I'll see you guys on the other side of the white flash. And I'll see you, Dave, hopefully just on PEP, because otherwise John's really sick. Next week. And thank you so much for your extreme long haul today.
Thank you very much.
Stay peppy. Welcome to the other side of the white flash. This is Chaz Unleashed. And I have to say, anyone who is still with us at the 2.5 hour mark, you are all heroes, every single one of you, because I barely made it. Just listening to myself while I'm editing, I've done about 90% of the first 2.5 hours of the edit. And I can't believe how annoying my block nose is. Why the hell didn't I use decongestant before? What was I thinking? I've got it now, so hopefully it's slightly less annoying. This reminds me of my dad when he first saw me perform on stage when I was at uni and doing like one of the uni stage shows. They called them reviews. And I asked him what he thought of my performance when we were driving home, and he was really quiet. I mean, for a start, he'd been quiet for 3 or 4 minutes before I'd said a thing. So I was almost breaking the silence by going, "So what do you think of the show?" And he sort of paused, about 3-4 seconds of very pregnant pause, and then he said, "This is all he said, Chaz, you have a very high, flat, nasal voice." And that was it. Just silence for the rest of the car trip home. He was right. And right now, my voice is even more nasal. Although, I suppose the blessing is that it's not high or flat. It's low and nasal and unbearable right at this particular moment. So anyway, well done to you all. We've got about 27, 28 minutes left. So I just want to deal with the Israel weapons topic because there's been so much bullshit this week about that topic. And I think by next week it'll be too late. So I just wanted to get it out of the way now, deal with it. I don't have to talk you through the whole topic. I just want to just deal with the bullshit. And that will do. That will do me. And then we can all just go home and I can take even more decongestant and let's never speak of this episode again. I'm just going to go through here of just headline by headline what I find to be massive beat-ups. Okay? That's all that we're going to do. Now, you know the story, I assume, which is that the Biden administration it chose to put a hold on a particular shipment of weapons to Israel, and that became a signal that they turned their back on Israel and they've embraced the Hamas wing of the Democratic Party, and this was momentous, and it was potentially the end of the line for Israel because of this betrayal, this stab in the back from Biden. Like, there was some real foaming at the mouth going on with this story. Okay, let's go through this. First of all, this has happened before. There hasn't been enough talk about that. This has happened before from Saint Reagan, okay? Ronald Reagan did this. He halted a shipment of artillery shells and cluster bombs in 1982 during Israel's invasion of Lebanon, while the US determined whether Israel's use of American weapons violated arms export laws, which is a kind of similar thing to what is happening at the moment. A pause while there's evaluation happening. Reagan also paused the shipment of F-16s in 1983 until Israel withdrew from Lebanon. So that sounds kind of pushy to me, pushy of an ally. And then 10 years later, George H.W. Bush told Israel an aid package of $10 billion in loan guarantees would only go through if Israel stopped using US money to build settlements on land that belonged to the Palestinians. That also sounds kind of familiar with what's happening at the moment in terms of what Israel are doing. There's lots of settlement building going on and lots of pushing settlers pushing Palestinians around in the West Bank. But you don't hear much about the fact this has happened before from the patron saint of the Republican Party, Ronald Reagan. Another thing that I think is misunderstood out there is this is not about invading Rafah. It's just not. It's about evacuation plans. What I mean by that is the red line that the Biden administration identified was invading Rafah without a substantive plan to protect the more than 1 million Palestinian civilians there. There was 1.3 million Palestinian civilians essentially sheltering in Rafah. Originally, it was about 800,000 people in Rafah, and that swelled up to 1.3 million. Now, about 450,000 people have left, which means there's still more people there than there were originally, but they're gradually leaving. And that's 450,000 since the warnings started being made by Israel that they were going to attack a few weeks back. Even now, like 3 weeks, 4 weeks after they started warning the people in Rafah, they still haven't explicitly communicated a humanitarian plan for getting all the refugees safely out, other than going, get out of there, get out of there. They have a zone here, a zone there, but not enough for 1.3 million people. So they still haven't communicated a substantive humanitarian plan to help reduce civilian casualties. Well, ideally eliminate civilian casualties, at least get close to it. And that is what this is about. That is what the Biden administration keeps on asking for. And Netanyahu, over and over again, like a month ago, was saying, oh, no, it'll be fine. We'll take care of it. We'll take care of it. Well, they haven't taken care of it. That's what this is about. So let's be clear about that. Also, Biden has a very specific definition of invasion. There's been a lot of attacking Rafah going on in the last week and a half, 2 weeks. As far as I know, he still doesn't count what's happening even now as an invasion of Rafah. A week after the invasion, on the last Friday, the Biden administration explicitly said that their warning was still hypothetical since Israel hadn't yet, by the administration's estimation, launched a full-scale invasion. This is a quote from John Kirby from last Friday. I wouldn't go so far as to say what we've seen here in the last 24 hours connotes or indicates a broad, large-scale invasion or major ground operation. It appears to be localized near the crossing and largely with the forces that had put there, with the forces they had put there at the beginning. So apparently if the forces have been there for a while, it's not a proper invasion. Apparently if it's only on the outskirts, it's not a proper invasion. Apparently there's a scale that's important. I don't know. I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm just saying people have been talking like the Rafah invasion is happening, and John Kirby saying, no, not by our definition. So even given that it's not the invasion they're trying to stop, but an invasion without a humanitarian plan, they're not counting what's going on as an invasion anyway. That's worth pointing out. And even then, even if there's no evacuation plans, even if you're ignoring the fact they're not even calling what's happening in an invasion, even with all of that, they can still do it without America anyway. This was one single shipment that wasn't meant to be flown out for weeks to come. It wasn't supposed to go out 2 weeks ago. They just announced that this upcoming shipment in a few weeks' time was going to be put on hold. I'm not even sure if even now that shipment has been or should have left by now. It was supposed to be a few weeks in advance. They declared they were putting a hold on it. So theoretically, Israel could tomorrow hand in this humanitarian plan, and then America go, great, here, have your shipment. And there wouldn't have been a delay at all because it still hasn't been due to go out for all I know. So it's not much of a hold at this point in time, okay? One shipment which may or may not be due to go out even now. And according to administration officials, the Israeli military has enough weapons supplied by the US and other partners to conduct the Rafah operation if it wants to anyway. And then to start fighting with Lebanon if they want. Anyway, they have a lot of weapons. Israel is not short of weapons, generally speaking, okay? In fact, it's not just the administration who say this. Daniel Hagari, the Israeli defense spokesperson, he agrees as well. He says they've got enough weapons for the invasion if they want. So this is clearly only symbolic. It's not a matter of life and death like a lot of conservative commentators are pretending. It's purely symbolic. There's a lot of politicking going on because obviously it's an election year. All right, so people also have said that Biden should have just talked behind the scenes. Why are you playing with life and death with holds of weapons that Israel so desperately needs? Why can't you just whisper behind the scenes, with an ally? Just take them aside and just explain the situation to them. You don't need to throw this big tantrum, Biden. Well, they have been quietly asking Israel for evacuation plans to try and prevent or reduce greatly the civilian casualties. They've been asking them for months at this point in time. And Netanyahu keeps on saying that it's fine, and he keeps on not giving them a plan. Like, at some point in time, you go, okay, well, what else can they do? Talking is not working. So what's the smallest action that they can undertake just to get their attention? The smallest one, just the next step up from incessant talking and being ignored. I think this is it. And by the way, this was not meant to be a public scolding. This was meant to be behind the scenes negotiation. That's why they picked a shipment that was a few weeks in advance. They picked the putting something on hold a few weeks in advance and quietly telling Israel behind the scenes so they could negotiate and just give them a little, hey guys, check this out. And they could sort it out before the shipment was even due to leave. But you know what happened? Israel leaked it because Israel's really good at playing America, especially soft Democrats who are caught between trying to seem tough and not appearing weak on defense and weak on supporting allies, but at the same time try to pander to the left of the party. Like it's a classic wedge issue for Democrats, and so Israel knows that they can hold Democrats' feet to the fire, and that's what they're trying to do. I actually don't blame Netanyahu for undergoing these political shenanigans, because, you know, what if he thinks he can get away with it? Why wouldn't he? He's gotten away with it plenty of times before, so I can see why he tried it again. I mean, it's a clever thing to try, but it shouldn't stop us calling out bullshit when we see it. And the elevation, the escalation of this minor move to be a massive consequence is just that, bullshit. Bit of spin, that's bullshit. People try to spin this as about Israel's defense. Like Senator Jackie Rosen, we need to provide Israel with the unconditional security assistance it needs to defend itself, and that demonstrates our unwavering support, particularly as Iran and its proxies escalate their attacks. This is not about Israel's defense, okay? They can get all the Iron Dome rockets they want. The Iron Dome rockets they want for defense, okay? This is not about defense. It's about whether Israel were allowed to attack, but not even allowed to attack with one particular weapon, a particular weapon of little precision value, but a lot of destruction value. And if you're telling them to stop blowing up people willy-nilly in cities, the biggest bombs, the 2,000-pound bombs, that's a good place to start. And even then, they could still use those bombs if they just properly evacuate the civilians first. And they're not doing it. So the spin about this being about defense is bullshit as well. More spin. This is the last push to finish the war. Mike McCall said something like this last weekend.
This is the last point, the last step in the completion of their military objective. And for us to step in and say, no, you can't go into Rafah and finish the job, I think it's tantamount to an arms embargo. It's also very similar for us to say in World War II, hey, like my dad's generation, you can invade all the way up to Berlin, but you can't go into Berlin to finish the job.
This is not true. This is not the last push. Even by Israel's estimation, I'm not sure you should believe it necessarily, but even by their estimation, there are 6 battalions of Hamas left. 4 of them are in Rafah. So even by their estimation, there's still 2 battalions of Hamas left. But let's ignore their estimation for a second, because there are clearly more Hamas out there than they are suggesting. Because even as we speak, Israel is battling Hamas in the north, again, exactly in the areas that they cleared, supposedly, a few months back. So Hamas, of course, I'm just going to sit there and wait to be bombed when they know that Israel is going to attack an area. They're probably going to, some of them are going to leave and hide somewhere else. And there's going to be whack-a-mole with Hamas forever. Like, this is obviously the next, I don't know how long, but I promise you this much, it's not going to end with Rafah. That much is clear. Another bit of spin.
This is all about Dearborn. This is about Biden wanting to win just a few thousand votes of Muslim voters in Dearborn. Or as some have said, like Rick Scott, he's described it as the pro-Hamas wing of the party. Let's listen to him saying that.
Biden is unfortunately now part of the pro-Hamas wing of his party. That's all they're worried about is he's worried about winning a presidential election.
Good job, Skeletor. Trump's also said similar kinds of things. Hamas murdered thousands of innocent civilians, including babies, and are still holding the Americans hostage if the hostages are still alive. Yet Crooked Joe's taking the side of these terrorists, just like he's sided with the radical mobs taking over our college campuses because his donors are funding them. Biden is weak, corrupt, and leading the world straight into World War III. Yeah, so taking the side of terrorists. Same kind of rhetoric. Obviously, that's not the case. The reason why Joe Biden is feeling the political pressure here is because it's not just the left side of the left, which, by the way, he's not losing many votes from in a lot of polls at the moment. What he's losing votes from is the moderate side of the left. It's independents. If look at the polls, the independents are turning against Israel because of the casualties and because of the ugly scenes, like often happens with war. I mean, look, yeah, I know Hamas has been playing this situation to try to increase the number of civilian casualties so they can win the propaganda war. I get that. But the fact is they are winning the propaganda war because those civilian casualties are there. And that is the problem for Joe Biden. He's feeling the pressure undoubtedly from the middle of America, not from the far left. Look at the polls. It's clear. And by the way, just when I talk about polls, you do need to be careful about polls because it really depends how you word them. And I'll give you an example. I saw one the other day, which I thought was really instructive. It's from YouGov. And 64% favor the ceasefire now. 64-13. So that's a huge endorsement for the inverted commas pro-Hamas wing, for the far left, right? Except, and that was, by the way, they included 50% Republicans, 50-25. So 64% of Americans favor the ceasefire now to 13%. 50% of Republicans favor the ceasefire now to 25%. But it's about the wording. Because when they asked these people whether they favor the ceasefire, even if Hamas does not release its remaining hostages to Israel, it became 28% in favor of that ceasefire to 44%, including, get this, 43% to 32% of Democrats. So it's almost 50-50 with Democrats favoring a ceasefire now if Hamas don't release its remaining hostages. So overall, it went from 64% favouring a ceasefire, generally, to 28% favouring a ceasefire, even if Hamas does not release its remaining hostages to Israel. So when you see ceasefire, people are assuming that the hostages would be released. That is an important assumption. Just remember that with polls. Okay. Also with spin, there's a lot of spin about whether Biden should be impeached. Tom Cotton says the House has no choice but to impeach Biden based on the Trump-Ukraine precedent of withholding foreign aid to help with the re-election. Only with Biden, it's true. Yeah, it's just like what Trump did with Ukraine back in 2019, but this is true. That's such bad faith. I'll just read out what Romney said, because he doesn't like this move either. Romney said, I don't see any equivalency at all. In the Trump-Ukraine scandal, Romney noted the former was withholding weapons in order to get them to do an investigation of his political opponent. That's obviously inappropriate. And then Romney went on to say, I think he's trying to placate the left wing of his party, and I think it's damaging to our credibility around the world. Like I said, I disagree with that. But anyway, Romney then went on to say, you stick with your friends and you let them conduct the war as they feel best. They've been attacked. Hamas declared war on Israel, killed its citizens, took hostages, committed war crimes, and Israel's defending itself. If politicians are going to be impeached for doing things that are politically attractive, we're all guilty, he says. So look, I don't necessarily agree with Mitt's take, but he's been very reasonable on the impeachment question. So that's why I read it out. And then finally, another bit of spin. There's a congressional act that they're trying to push through at the moment. Steve Scalise
is trying to push through the Israel Security Assistance Support Act, which requires the prompt delivery of aid to Israel on penalty of State Department and Defense Department appropriations being withheld if they don't deliver weapons promptly. And they might get some Democrats on that one, but I don't think so. They've got Democrats, because 26 Democrats signed a letter expressing concern about the suspension of weapons, but the Democrats will get whipped into line, I think. And obviously Biden won't approve of that that bill, and they won't get veto-proof majority. So it's not going to happen. But once again, such an overreaction when there hasn't even been necessarily a hold on anything yet. It was announcing something that may happen in the future for one shipment. Huge overreaction. And can you think of anything, like I keep on saying, that they could do less than this? Unless you think that there should be zero accountability and America should write a blank check for anything Israel wants without questioning what happens to their weapons whatsoever at any point in time for any reason, then there has to be some kind of ability to call for accountability of these weapons at any stage. There has to be, doesn't it? And yeah, anyway, I think finally, people are acting like Biden had this huge backflip when then another $1 billion shipment went through of arms after this. They said they acted like he was whipped into line. Maybe he was, but I don't think it's a reversal, given he said it was just going to be one shipment and it was going to have the big bombs, that shipment. The $1 billion package that went through afterwards didn't have the big bombs in it. According to the Wall Street Journal, at least, the current package the new package that went through after this, after the hold, included the potential transfer of $700 million in tank ammunition, $500 million in tactical vehicles, and $60 million in mortar rounds. They're not the big bombs. It would stop short of including the 2,000-pound bombs. Okay. Admittedly, the timing was terrible that this hold news came through less than a day before the Biden administration announced its intent to cut off U.S. arms sales, to cut off the suspension of weapon sales to Israel's enemies, such as Qatar and Lebanon. So they had a hold on Qatar and Lebanon getting weapons, and they actually, a congressional hold, and Biden suspended those restrictions on those countries less than a day before they cut off Israel, kind of temporarily. So that was bad timing. I do admit that. But one more thing, I'll tell you who cut through all this shit. Anthony Blinken. He had a really good, I wish people had paid attention to this quote on, I think it was Meet the Press. Have a listen to this.
There are two things. One is that, as the president said, and as we said in many conversations over the last couple of months, there has to be a credible plan for the civilians.
Have you seen a credible plan?
We have not. Second, there's something else that's important. We also haven't seen a plan for what happens the day after this war in Gaza ends. Because right now, the trajectory that Israel is on is, even if it goes in and takes heavy action in Rafah, there will still be thousands of armed Hamas left. We've seen in areas that Israel has cleared, in the north, even in Khan Yunis, Hamas coming back. So the trajectory right now is that going into to Rafah, even to deal with these remaining battalions, especially in the absence of a plan for civilians, risks doing terrible harm to civilians and not solving the problem, a problem that both of us want to solve, which is making sure Hamas cannot again govern Gaza. Israel's on the trajectory potentially to inherit an insurgency with many armed Hamas left, or if it leaves, a vacuum filled by chaos, filled by anarchy, and probably refilled by Hamas. We've been talking to them about a much better way of getting an enduring result, enduring security, both in Gaza itself and much more broadly in the region. Those conversations continue. And that's what partners, that's what allies do. We are clear-eyed and we speak the truth to each other as we see it. We have American interests first and foremost in mind. We also have Israel's interests in mind. And there may be a difference in view in the best way to achieve them. But that's also the nature of the relationship.
See, that sums up everything. He summed up the whole, almost all the bullshit there. He summed it up in 1 2-minute grab, and people just ignored it. It's much more fun to pursue the bullshit, obviously. By the way, Israel agrees with Blinken. The IDF Chief of Staff, Herzi Halavilast, reportedly criticised Netanyahu last weekend for his failure to put forth a viable day-after plan for the enclave. He said, "We're now operating once again in Jabalia, trying to kill Hamas in areas they'd cleared. As long as there's no diplomatic process to develop a governing body in the Strip that isn't Hamas, we'll have to launch campaigns again and again in other places to dismantle Hamas's infrastructure." So he's calling the bullshit as well. An Israeli official told the Dispatch, "There are no political achievements through military operations. Military operations and political maneuvers should go together. And if you do only military operations, then the political problem remains. What's going into the territory that we left is terrorism again. Terrorism and chaos, since there was no kind of governing authority in the area." And I will just say one more thing about this before I talk about the report that has come through as well, which is, while this is a massive beat up, it actually matters. The beat up actually matters more than anything. And the reason why is because even though there isn't much practical issue here, they're publicizing and blowing up and escalating the tensions between America and Israel. And you know what happens then? Iran's watching that. And it's natural for Iran to then say, well, let's test them out. If they've got a bit of falling out, let's put a bit of pressure on this relationship, shall we? So I would say right now there's a very high risk of Iran's proxies ramping up their attacks to try and test out if America's going to help defend Israel under those attacks. So this could have ramifications. I will see what happens. But I reckon that because of this bullshit and this clear attempt to try to politicize the war even further in terms of the domestic political situation in America, because of that, it might escalate the war. And that would be a great shame, because I think the war's escalated more than enough already. Okay, and then finally, I want to talk about the State Department assessment that dropped this week in this environment. In February, Biden issued a National Security Memorandum 20, NSM 20. What does that do? That directs the US State Department to obtain certain credible and reliable written assurances from foreign governments receiving American defense articles and, as appropriate, defense services. And those assurances should state that they will abide by US and international law. Countries that don't provide those assurances are not eligible to receive US-funded weapons, although there is a potential waiver there, but whatever. Theoretically, they can't get weapons. Israel complied. Yoav Gallant submitted their assurances to the Biden administration on March 14. Blinken accepted them as credible and reliable on March 25. But then there's step two. Step two, what they need under the NSM 20 is they need the Department of State and Department of Defense need to report to Congress within 90 days on the extent to which the partners are actually abiding by those assurances. Now, they asked for three things in detail from this report. They want them to assess the US weapons recipients' violations of international law, or hopefully no violations. They need to assess whether there's failures to implement best practices for civilian harm mitigation. And three, they need to assess if there's any restrictions on humanitarian aid. Okay? It's a bit unclear whether it forces, just the NSM 20 forces the pausing of weaponry if the report is unfavorable. But there are heaps of laws already on the books. The ley laws, sections 502B and 620I of the Foreign Assistance Act, and the Conventional Arms Transfer policy. All those laws require the suspension of arms transfers or security assistance if certain conditions aren't met that would come through in that report. Okay. Note, though, this does not apply for defensive weapons. The NSM 20 does not extend to air defense systems
or weapons intended to be used for strictly defensive purposes. They do not need to be reported on. They do not require assurances. Those are guaranteed. Okay? So the Iron Dome is protected regardless. This is all about offensive weapons, not defensive weapons. Now, the report came out on Friday. So how did Israel do? That covered the period between January 2023 and the report's submission. And let's break it down to its threes, shall we? First of all, humanitarian law. Now, the report points to, how'd they go with, did they break international humanitarian law or not? The report points to numerous credible UN, NGO, and media reports of Israeli airstrikes impacting civilians and civilian objects. They have raised questions about Israel's compliance with its legal obligations under international humanitarian law and with best practices for mitigating civilian harm. Also, the report says, given Israel's significant reliance on US-made defense articles, it is reasonable to assess that defense articles covered under NSM 20 have been used by Israeli security forces since October 7 in instances inconsistent with its international humanitarian law obligations or with established best practices for mitigating civilian harm. Okay, so that's vague. Does that mean they have evidence or not? They did say that they didn't have sufficient evidence to point to a single instance where they could definitively say that international humanitarian law was breached. Definitively. Now, that's not surprising, though, because they also detailed a complete lack of transparency from Israel. The Israeli government has shared, quote, has not shared complete information to verify whether US defense articles covered under NSM 20 were specifically used in actions that have been alleged as violations of international human rights or humanitarian law in Gaza or in the West Bank or in East Jerusalem during the period of the report. Although they did share some information on specific incidents. Is that okay? Is that all right? To only share some information and to not share information, all the information about what they're doing with Americans' weapons when America wants to know what they're doing with America's weapons? Is that all right? Seemed to be all right from the report. That's weird to me. I feel like that's kind of a violation in itself if they're not being transparent with what they're doing with those weapons. But look, hey, the report said they're not being definitive. There's no definitive proof. Apparently that's enough. And just in case that's not enough excuses for you from the report, they also said a country's overall commitment to international humanitarian law is not necessarily disproven by individual international humanitarian law violations, even though they found none apparently, so long as that country is taking appropriate steps to investigate and where appropriate, determine accountability for international humanitarian law violations. So I hope you human rights activists are feeling seen by that. There is some enforcement going on, apparently, in Israel, so it doesn't matter if they violate every now and then. Not that we'd know, because they're not sharing details with America anyway. Let's go for the second part, civilian harm mitigation. The intelligence community, according to the report, quote, assesses that Israel could do more to avoid civilian harm. Ah, really? That seems to contradict humanitarian law there, because customary international humanitarian law stipulates all feasible precautions must be taken to avoid, and in any event to minimize incidental loss of civilian life, injury to civilians, and damage to civilian objects. So you're telling me they didn't minimize harm, so they are breaching international humanitarian law, yeah? Well, the report doesn't seem to resolve that seeming contradiction. They just note that Israel could do more to avoid civilian harm, and all feasible precautions must be taken to avoid damage to civilians and injury to civilians and civilian life. Just left at that. Drew no conclusions. Interesting. This is the closest that they came. While Israel has the knowledge experience and tools to implement best practices for mitigating civilian harm in its military operations. The results on the ground, including high levels of civilian casualties, raise substantial questions as to whether the IDF is using them effectively in all cases. So they're being ineffective sometimes. Is that a breach or not? It implies they might be trying but failing. Or are they not even trying? Very vague. It's hard to know what they mean by that phrase. They haven't even finished going through the incidents, by the way. They said there have been 85 alleged incidents of civilian harm involving Israeli military operations in Gaza submitted for evaluation, and only about 40% of those cases have been closed. So there you go. So that's the second section. Also a bit unsatisfying from my point of view. The third section, interfering with aid. Section 620I of the Foreign Assistance Act specifically bars military aid to any government that prohibits or otherwise restricts directly or indirectly the transport or delivery of United States humanitarian assistance. Apparently, there's no violations of this. Really? Well, the report also says that the Israeli government has taken actions that, quote, delayed or had a negative effect on the delivery of aid to Gaza. And that, quote, the overall level reaching Palestinian civilians, while improved, remains insufficient. Huh? So Israeli government actions, quote, delayed the delivery of aid. But at the same time, they didn't restrict the delivery of humanitarian assistance. That they seem like they mean the same thing to me. Seems like a huge contradiction. They resolve that contradiction by saying Israel didn't restrict the delivery of aid arbitrarily. That's what it says in the legislation. Arbitrarily. Seems like splitting hairs to me. They do give an example. They give a few examples, actually. Humanitarian organizations have documented restrictions on items that the Israeli government considers dual use items with a military and a civilian application. So, for instance, anesthetics, maternity kits, water filters. These are all things that they need in their aid, but they have a potential military use if you take them apart and reuse them in a different way. The presence of a dual-use item on the truck entering Gaza can and does result in Israeli authorities denying the entry of the entire truckload of aid. The report acknowledges that the Israeli government has on occasion stretched dual-use issues to a concerning degree. That's one example. Another example, the UN Office of the Coordinator for Humanitarian Affairs has regularly documented instances in which Israeli authorities have not approved humanitarian aid delivery missions in various parts of Gaza, quite apart from dual use. Thirdly, they also note in the report that Israel has attacked humanitarian aid workers and facilities, possibly accidentally. I mean, I would hope they don't go out of their way to blow up aid workers, but as we saw with the World Central Kitchen scenario where they blew up aid workers because they thought there might be one low-level anonymous militant that was nearby. That was potentially riding shotgun with them. The report actually cited that particular example. The UN says more than 250 humanitarian workers have been killed in the course of their work or in other circumstances, whatever that means. So that's a bit vague as well. Anyway, those three examples definitively show restriction of the delivery of humanitarian assistance, but apparently in a non-arbitrary fashion. So that's okay, apparently. Part of the problem here with this report, where the reason why you've got seeming contradictions on all three parts, where you seem to have evidence of a problem, but then they're them just waving away the problem, is the government's at war with itself on this report. The Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labour and USAID apparently recommended that Blinken conclude that Israel had violated the terms of the National Security Memorandum. But Ambassador to Israel, Jack Lew, an outgoing US Gaza humanitarian envoy, David Satterfield, said Israel is not violating international law in its war in Gaza. Their argument was that while Israel did restrict humanitarian aid in the past and create obstacles for aid to reach Gaza, it's changed its policy since April when Biden delivered an ultimatum to Netanyahu. Now that sounds piss weak to me, but also, is it okay to break the conditions every day for the first 3 months of your assessment period until the last week, and then that's okay? This is what Senator Chris Van Hollen said. I'm getting a flare out. For those who are watching the video, I'm getting a flare out of the light for some reason. Sorry about that. This is what Chris Van Hollen said about the report. Today's report indicates a continuation of a disturbing pattern where the expertise and analyses of those working most closely on these issues at the State Department and at USAID have been swept aside to facilitate a predetermined policy outcome based on political convenience. I don't disagree. My take is it's impossible to know the full extent of the truth from this report because it seems certain that this report was never going to find out Israel in breach. So it's hard to draw any conclusion from this. Now, I don't know what your view on Israel and Palestine is. To me, it's not about that. It's about whether you care about the rule of law or not. If you care about the rule of law, this report isn't good at all because they are clearly doing whatever they can to ignore the laws that are on the books to keep weapons flowing to Israel regardless. Now, that's not news, I guess, but still, we should acknowledge it when it happens. We shouldn't get so cynical that we don't even talk about it. So I just did. And that will tie this over until next week. I can't believe you guys stuck with me till the very end, the whole 3 hours with his nose. Thank you so much for that. I am now going to go away and steam. I will see you guys next week. Stay peppy.